Week 3 of college football, everyone. Let's get it. There should be a decent game every Thursday night. There just should be. Maybe we've got one with Memphis Navy. I think there was one game besides the Miami Bethune-Cookman scrimmage going on tonight. So check me on that one. I know that Friday night we've got a Big Ten ACC matchup, the first of 6 this weekend. Somebody research this for us. Once we get to the level of a research department here at the Voice of College Football, we will be all over items like this. 6 games between the ACC and the Big Ten. The Big Ten couldn't have maybe reached out to the SEC to fill a slot or two. And again, this is because all the schools schedule on their own. So they all go out and do whatever they want and just try to find games instead of there being a governing committee that takes charge of scheduling. I'm up for that. If it pays well, it's got to pay well. If it pays well, I'll take that on. That doesn't sound like a full-time job. It's not a full-time job. That would be a job. So I would check out. No, I would still be on here with all of you during the off season, but from about the end of the season, right after the national championship game. Okay, we'd wrap up the season, and then I may need to take a couple-week hiatus. Maybe not. Maybe I'd still jump on here once a day for a couple hours. Not a big deal. Spend the rest of my day working on the schedule. Not me, my committee. Me. We build the formula. We work it through. You'd have to nuance the formula a little bit. So I believe in a formula for scheduling, but then you'd have to look it over just to make sure that you're staying within guidelines. I'm a guidelines guy and typically not a rules guy. Guidelines. Come across that many times in life. Guidelines. I'm thinking of about 12 different examples of times that you, for example, you shouldn't lie. That's a rule. Shouldn't lie. There's a few times in life where it's actually acceptable. It's actually the better option. There are times, they're very infrequent. Very infrequent. So guidelines, yes. Would love to do the scheduling. So if the Power 5 conferences and the Group of 5, everyone could come together and really decide what's going on and what they're going to do and what this is going to look like long term. Wouldn't that be something? You get the 4 George Kliavkoff off in somewhere. He's at his like version of Camp David in Wyoming or somewhere. I guess nobody's heard from him for weeks. I wonder why nobody's heard from him for weeks. I might be exaggerating. I don't want to take that to an extreme. Somebody's going to let me know he's been at the office, but I understand that, yeah, for days, for weeks, whatever it was, couldn't find the guy. The guy wasn't around. So maybe the Power 4 conference committees and the Group of 5 guys, we could get together. And could you imagine actually if we got all those guys in a room and they actually discussed what would be best for college football? And then you bring me in, we talk about scheduling, and we would map out the schedule. But 6 games between the Big Ten and the ACC this weekend. Now, among the 6, you would think that there could actually be some good teams that would be playing. No Penn State, no Michigan, Ohio State, Clemson, Florida State. None of those teams could figure out a way to play. But we do have Rutgers and Virginia Tech, and we do have 6 games between the Big Ten and the ACC. Will be interesting. I am guessing they're going to split 3-3, but that will go a long way in determining the depth, the mid to low tiers, and how well they are playing in those particular conferences. Duke and Northwestern have played 7 times since 2015. Duke's up 4-2. They should be up 5-2 by Saturday afternoon as an 18-point favorite, and we can talk about Duke and their quest to go to 3-0. Let's take our first call here at the Voice of College Football, understanding that if you've got a personal brand yourself or a company that you would like to benefit from our exposure here at the Voice of College Football, we would love to partner with you. So please hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. MarkRogersTV at Gmail. We can discuss what we can do for you. Man, we're going to kick it off in a big way. We go right to the top of the board. So the encore for the rest of you is going to be mighty difficult following this act. We've got Jeffrey here to lead us off. Jeffrey, what's going on tonight?
Really appreciate that, Mark. And definitely, I'm looking forward to the week 3 games. Yes, the slate is not as good as the previous 2 weeks, and you mentioned that there aren't any great teams, the top of the Big Ten or the ACC playing each other, those top teams, but I'm still looking forward to the games. Obviously, the noon game between Louisville versus Indiana, everybody's been talking about here on the channel, and I had to chime in my thoughts. Me and Austin have been looking forward to this game a lot. I don't know if he's talked to you yet about this matchup, but I picked Indiana to win, and he picked Louisville to win, not surprisingly. But I don't know. Obviously, you probably have your picks on Patreon, so not to give it away. But what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Well, this would be one game I'm probably not going to pick on Patreon, so I can make a selection here.
Mm-hmm.
We do all the top 25 games on Patreon, and then if there are some other matchups that intrigue me, I will select those as well. So Louisville, Indiana. Well, we know that Coach Tom Allen came out, of course, and he named Taven Jackson as the starting quarterback, said that he is the starting quarterback. And I looked at this because I've got a couple platforms out there that have asked me to do podcasts each week, and I was looking at this. So Taven Jackson being the starter, 19 of 26 thus far, is not throwing a pick. Of course, they're going to have to develop him. They have to stretch this offense a little bit around him, give him a little bit more of the playbook, a little bit more each week, kind of move him along. Don't throw it all at him at one time, but they got to bring him along. Louisville, of course, got down by double digits against Georgia Tech and came back and played a strong game there. And then you gave us the update on the Murray State Louisville game, that 56-0 debacle. You were the one out there keeping an eye on that one. Besides that, I got to tell you that Aaron Casey, of course, impresses me, and the Indiana front seven on defense. Ohio State didn't really test them in the secondary as much as you would expect Ohio State to be testing anyone. But Indiana, I think, is a strong, solid defensive unit. And if they can bring Taven Jackson along, they might be able to reach your goal of 6 wins. And this is not as much of a blowout possibility as I anticipated in the offseason. In the offseason, I was like, that's kind of neat when they play a neutral site game at NFL Stadium, but who are we kidding? This is not going to be much of a game. I do think it's going to be a decent football game.
I mean, I think it will too. I mean, because I knew that Indiana brought in a lot of transfers. And when I said that they would go 5-7, I was banking on more of the transfers to hit than miss. Because obviously the schedule's still pretty tough. And Indiana's not a great team overall. I mean, they've been bad the last 2 years. But this year's team just looked better to me versus the last years because of the guys that Tom Allen brought in. But the key is that more of them had to hit. And I feel like it's been about 50-50. I mean, you've had some guys like Andre Carter from Western Michigan. He's been really good on defense. Aaron Casey's obviously a returner from last season at Indiana, so he's not a transfer. But like you mentioned, he's been really good. Jameer Johnson, the transfer safety from Texas, has been pretty good. So they've got some nice pieces there. But not all of them have hit. Some of them have been kind of average, but some of those guys have been really good. And then on offense, you got obviously Jalen Lucas is really good. He had a massive mistake against Indiana State. He can't do that against Louisville. He had a fumble that was returned for a touchdown. That was the only points that Indiana State put up in that game because Indiana's defense only gave up 90 yards. So Indiana State wouldn't have scored if Jalen Lucas didn't fumble. But beside that fumble, he had a lot of yards for scrimmage, like 130, couple touchdowns. So he's dynamic. And then Taven Jackson, he has to stretch the defense, like you said, get the ball to Cam Camper and, some of those guys on the outside, Donovan McCulley. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like Indiana and Louisville's talent gap's not very wide. I know Louisville's more talented. They are. But it's not by as much as a lot of people would think. Because like you said, coming into the season, most people probably thought Indiana was going to be really bad. But the more you look at the roster and some of those guys that have hit through the portal, they don't look too bad.
Big Ten fans and actually fans of this team at Indiana will be familiar with one Jack Plummer, who, of course, was the quarterback a few years ago at Purdue, left to go to Cal, has been reunited with Jeff Brom. So you got to think that that's a good thing for him, comfortable with the coaching staff, the offense, and all of that. 4 touchdowns and 3 picks, 64% completion percentage. And I do like their running back, Jawar Jordan. He's a good player. Again, I caught the comeback against Georgia Tech. That was impressive. I don't necessarily think that Georgia Tech's some ACC contender, but they're better. They're better under Brent Key. They're a legitimate foe, and so that was a nice win for Louisville. I do think that Indiana, much of what Ohio State could not do against Indiana, it had a lot to do. Sure, first time starter, and them being extremely conservative. I've never seen Ohio State
that game was the battle of conservative teams. Like, I couldn't believe that game. Nothing happened.
There was a couple times Urban Meyer was that conservative when he knew, okay, nobody's scoring on us, and I'm trying to figure out Cardell Jones or JT Barrett 2015. There were a few times, few of those games. I actually was at an Ohio State game that they needed a pick 6. They were like number 1 in the country. They needed a pick 6 from Darren Lee to beat Northern Illinois. But since then, my goodness, I've not seen that. But I do legitimately, to give Indiana credit, I think a lot of it had to do with Indiana. I think that they are stout up front. You mentioned Jalen Lucas too. It takes me back to Tom Allen during Big Ten Media Days. One of his driving points was, we have to be more explosive on offense. Well, I was sitting there thinking that, can somebody hand me the mic? Because I know you need to be more. Can you tell us how you're going to generate that? And I was thinking, the only answer I can come up with is he's going to say, get the ball into the hands of Jalen Lucas. He's an exceptional player. Got nicked up right against Ohio State, had to leave that game. Then he came back with a nice game last week. He's got 152 total yards this season.
Yeah, 100%. I think that when you look at a guy like Jalen Lucas, his size helps and hurts him, because him being so small allows him to be shifty, and he's so quick. Once he gets away from a tackler, he's gone. But him being so small, I do worry about the injuries, that can mount up for him, and that's why Indiana tries to not use him too much. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be a good game. I know more people are going to be paying attention to the other noon games than probably the Indiana-Louisville game, but if those other games aren't close and Indiana-Louisville is a close game, I think it definitely will be a game people should flip to, because, neutral site, it's going to be a good atmosphere. Both teams, probably 50-50 crowd. I think Louisville's favored by 10, but yeah, I just think Indiana's a better team. And to your point, when you mentioned Jack Plummer, the thing that helps with Indiana is the fact that Jeff Brom and Jack Plummer, Tom Allen knows him already. And granted, I know that he's only won one game against him. I think he's 4-1. Jeff Brom is against Tom Allen, but it's his first year at Louisville. There's a lot of things that they have to iron out, and Plummer has thrown 3 picks already. So if Indiana's defense that is improved can force a couple mistakes, I think they can possibly pull out a win there. But it's going to be a good game. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure, I don't know if you have any callers yet, but to touch on some of the other early games, because I know you're probably going live tomorrow. I'm guessing, so maybe I can.
Yeah, we'll go live after the Maryland-Virginia game.
Awesome. So I'll probably call and talk about
some of these games. The first of the Big Ten ACC Challenge over the weekend.
Yeah, it's great that you lose the Big Ten ACC Challenge in basketball, but now we've got some pseudo Big Ten ACC Challenge going on in football. It's pretty cool. But that Maryland-Virginia game, I am kind of interested in that one a little bit, because Maryland has not looked that explosive to start the season. They beat Charlotte. They did their job, but they weren't super impressive in that game on NBC. Virginia, I mean, ever since, Bronco Mendenhall resigned out of nowhere, they've been terrible. And, that year they had Bryce Perkins and they went to the ACC title game. They were solid. They were fun to watch, but Virginia's nowhere near where they've been in the last, probably decade or so. And it's on the road. I think they can keep it maybe within 10, possibly, if Maryland does not play that well. But Maryland is the better team. They should win. I think it's going to be easier for them to beat Virginia than it's going to be for Louisville to beat Indiana.
Oh, absolutely. I would say the same thing right there. Yeah, Terps are a 2-touchdown favorite at home. Uh, only led Charlotte 14-9, or trailed Charlotte 14-9 in the third quarter. Only had a one-score lead, and before they tacked down some touchdowns there in the fourth quarter. Talia's thrown 2 interceptions in his first 2
Mhm.
games. Roman Hemby's off to a nice start, 7 yards per carry. Yeah, the Terps, I think they're still stuck in the middle of the Big Ten. I don't see indication that they can break through against the big boys, but
Mhm.
they should be better than Michigan State, Indiana, Rutgers. Although Rutgers, they're playing some defense, showing us something there. Yeah, Virginia started a new quarterback last week. Can't think of
Mhm.
his name. I'll look up. They had 5 quarterbacks in play at one point. They were trying like everybody off the street. He is the starting quarterback at Monmouth. He was the
Mhm.
starting quarterback at Monmouth. He transferred, and he got off to a 13 for 14 start against James Madison last week.
Mhm.
I don't know what his final stat line was, but they played a barn burner against JMU
Mhm.
last week, lost 36-35, and they hung with Tennessee for about a quarter and a half before they got, kicked around by 36 in that one. So yeah, Virginia's probably the worst team. We're gonna have quite the battle maybe for the worst team in the ACC between the 2 Virginia teams, Tech and UVA, the final game of the season.
Boston College is terrible.
Oh well, you got Boston College too.
Boston College is really bad. Jeff Halfley is holding on for dear life there. But yeah, Virginia is toward the bottom of the ACC. I completely agree. Sad to see, too, because they're not a bad program overall. But yeah, I mean, I forgot his name, too, but I did see his name because when I was talking about this game the other day, but I forgot. It usually takes me at least a few times to get a guy's name in my head, a few games, but with so many teams and everything. But like you said, Maryland, I was expecting more from them. A lot of people were higher on Maryland, and maybe they'll get it turned around. But like to your point, Maryland's better than Rutgers, Indiana, Michigan State, but I could see them losing to one of them if they're not careful, because they don't seem like, they looked a lot better last year. Like last year, the way they hung against Ohio State, they had their moments where they were, they were clearly the 4th best team in the East, but this season they don't look like they're the clear 4th best team in the East. They probably are, and maybe they will be at the end of the year, but they just don't look as good.
Anthony Calandria is our
That guy.
player as the starting quarterback there, the Monmouth transfer. So as I posted on Twitter today, everyone, you can be a fan, just don't be a dumb one. So we educate you here at the Voice of College Football. Be a smart fan.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah, so those other
Anything
games.
else, Jeffrey? Actually, I am so dedicated to my
Mhm.
job. I watched some of the Boston College Holy Cross game yesterday afternoon, believe it or not.
Unbelievable. Yeah, they lost to Northern Illinois and they hung on against Holy Cross. It's insane. Like they're probably the worst Power 5 team. They're awful, unfortunately. Even
Yeah, I was a
Northwestern
little,
beat UTEP 38-7.
yeah, I was a bit surprised that Emmett Moorhead, he was the quarterback who replaced Phil Jerkovic last season down the stretch and actually threw a game-winning touchdown. Big upset of NC State. They benched him after one game. It wasn't due to injury. They benched him after that loss to Northern Illinois, and they had a quarterback, Castellanos is his last name, was
Mhm.
their guy that typical Boston College kind of
Mhm.
got. Well, he and Moorhead are pretty much the same guy in that they run around and try to make plays with their feet, aren't necessarily gifted with tremendous passing skills. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe part of it's those BC's defense. The last question I was going to ask is, like I said, I'll probably be back tomorrow to talk more about the Saturday games. But between those other 3 games, Utah State, Air Force, Army, UTSA, and Navy, Memphis, which game are you looking forward to the most of those 3?
The games there at the top, easily Air Force and Utah State.
Hmm. That's a good
Out of
game.
the
I'm looking forward to them all 3, but that one's good.
Yeah, it's actually not a bad night of football on Friday night. If you just want competitive games and are interested in different types of offenses, obviously with Army and Air Force playing, yeah, Utah State. We saw them against Iowa, put up
Mm-hmm.
a pretty good fight 2 weeks ago. Only lose by 10. UTSA lost to Houston by a field goal. Air Force coming off a strong season. They're 2-0 as well.
Yeah, and then on Thursday, Navy, Memphis, they, always usually play on a Thursday night or a Friday night, something like that. And the other game, Miami, Bethune-Cookman, won't be close. But like you said, all three of the service academies, different style of play. It's going to be interesting. UTSA, though, I feel bad for Frank Harris, though, because Zachary Franklin leaving, they don't look the same. He's got 3 picks already this season, and that's going to hurt him, possibly having an NFL chance maybe if he can't turn a season around. They just don't look as dynamic at all.
Yeah, between Penn State, Illinois, and LSU, Mississippi State at noon on Saturday, I don't know if I can squeeze in IU, Jeffrey.
I know. That's what I was saying. I know those other games are going to get more attention. That's what I'm saying. If they're blowouts, check out the Big Ten Network. Maybe, that game if it's close. But K-State, Missouri, I'm not buying it. I've seen people say Missouri upset, possibly. I don't see it, though. I feel like of all of them, Mississippi State beating LSU is the most possible, and then it's Illinois over Penn State.
I'm right there with you. I am right there with you.
Can't wait for those games. And BC, don't get destroyed against Florida State. Keep it within 4 scores if you're lucky.
Within 4 scores. Yes. All right, Jeffrey, appreciate you being here. Call back tomorrow night if you got a chance.
Definitely. I appreciate that, and hope you have a great night talking college football.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Again, I got a couple podcasts out there that we just started. One would be Big Ten Paradigm. We'll tell you more about that. We'll leave the link. We'll do all those good things to get you informed. Big Ten Paradigm that we just dropped this afternoon on the College Gridiron Coast to Coast Network. We appreciate those folks asking us to do a Big Ten podcast, and then also another one that we will talk a little bit more about when I find out a little bit more about that platform. But a couple podcasts, the audio variety that we've got available now. We've got Matthew Miller on the line. Texas Tuesdays. If we don't promote that enough, folks, it's because I'm tied up on Tuesdays. While Matthew's knocking it out on Texas Tuesdays, I've got Iowa and I've got Nebraska. So Matthew, my apologies if I don't get the word out quite as much as I should, but here we are, folks. Texas Tuesdays right here at the Voice of College Football.
No, you're all good. I just got to call out somebody because I just saw him in the comments.
Yep.
John DeLon, you're always here when Texas is down, and then when Texas beats Alabama, I never see in the comments section. It's pretty interesting to me. To me, you got to show up either way, buddy. So I know your LSU Tigers got their butt whooped week 1 versus Florida State. You've been talking all the smack. Yep, there you are about Texas. We whoop Alabama and you just disappear. So I got to call people out on that, Mark. You got to keep them honest, in my opinion.
Yeah, you have to be here, win or lose, whatever it is. Just be consistent. But John, we appreciate you, faithful viewer.
He is
marking
faithful.
to us discussing lines in the chat. You can discuss all the point spreads that you want to. Yes.
Okay, so I honestly just kind of want to debate with you. I don't really care. Obviously, I think you do a great job with the top 25. That makes sense. Why is Texas not number 1? Rice is better than Southern Miss, in my opinion. And then you beat Alabama on the road, which 2 teams have done in the last 54 attempts. And Florida State won, in my opinion, kind of a home game in Orlando versus LSU. So why do you have Florida State 1 and Texas 2?
Okay, so understand the tricky thing is evaluating the teams because you can always play the connection game of the 3rd or 4th degree. You can always say, okay, well, Florida State blasted LSU. How good is LSU? Well, so you have to make some assumptions. And so my assumptions are that Alabama and LSU are pretty close to being the same team. If anything, I believe more in Alabama than I do in LSU. So to your point right there. And we know that it's difficult to win in Tuscaloosa, but I'm not rating Alabama as being Alabama, vintage Alabama. I do believe that was, while Texas was most of the game the better team. I watched the entire game. Most of the game, I thought Texas is playing better. Regardless of what the score is, Texas is playing better on both sides of the ball. Alabama did take a lead with about 7 minutes left in the game?
No, they took a lead. No, we got the ball with 7 minutes left, up by 10. So I think they took the lead at the very end of the 3rd quarter because I know at the very beginning of the fourth quarter we scored, and then like the next drive we intercepted a pass from them. So it was at the very end of the third quarter, I believe.
Okay. So we're basically going into the fourth quarter and Alabama's got a lead, as opposed to Florida State did just about everything they could in the first half against LSU to keep them in the game. Personal fouls all over the place, dropped passes all over the place, and LSU stayed in the game. And then as soon as Florida State stopped making mistakes, most of which were their fault, some of them you could question the officials' decisions, they put up 31 consecutive points on LSU in what is a neutral site game, technically. And then I would just say that Florida State completely trounced Southern Miss. Your ratings, Rice versus Southern Miss. I'm not prepared to make that call between Rice and Southern Miss as to who's the better team.
Well, I would say just right now because Rice beat Houston. I don't think Houston's that good, but Southern Miss beat Alcorn State. So, I mean, that's definitely a better win for Rice. I mean, I guess I'm going into it to the point of like, if I'm going to stop the season right now and I'm ranking for college football playoff rankings, I think Texas has a better resume than Florida State does.
Yeah, and I can understand that. So also understand that while I'm rating the entire resume, the marquee wins are much more the data point that I'm stressing and I'm reviewing than did you beat Southern Miss by 53 or did you beat Rice by 30?
Yeah.
Although I do look at that, make that comparison. It's a complete resume. What really matters is not how much you beat the 65th best team in the country versus somebody else beating the 85th best team in the country. If you're that good,
Yeah.
I don't think it much matters. So it was basically an Alabama versus LSU comparison.
So you just think Florida State controlled the game better than
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine then. Another thing, I wanted to hit on a couple things. Alabama's demise, I think, has been greatly overstated. I've heard people talking about 8-4, whatever. I think at worst, especially with the downside of the SEC, this is a 9-3 Alabama team. For the simple fact, I'm going to read off some of the names. The last 5 quarterbacks to beat Alabama: Quinn Ewers, Hendon Hooker, Jane Daniels, Stetson Bennett, and Joe Burrow. 3 of those guys right now play in the NFL. Jane Daniels will play in the NFL. Quinn Ewers will play in the NFL. On top of that, if you look at their numbers, all of those guys combined for like 17 touchdowns and 1 interception. So you basically have to be an NFL quarterback who plays a very good game when you play Alabama. And how many of those are in the SEC this year? There's obviously still Jaden Daniels, but he barely won a game in double overtime on a 2-point conversion at home last year. And they're going to be playing at Alabama this year. The only team that really comes to mind, and I think Connor Wegman would have to have the game of his life, is Texas A&M because it's on the road. Alabama's not going to lose another home game. I don't see that happening. I think the crowd's going to be even more pissed off along with the players. They're not going to lose another home game. So I think it's going to come down to on the road, and that's by far their hardest road game. Like A&M, Kyle Field versus a pretty talented team. I think A&M always underperforms, but they always play up to Alabama.
I would not be surprised if the chat responded to your comment about Texas A&M because people tend to overreact and because they looked awful against Miami. But yes, Texas A&M will be a hurdle for Bama to clear on the road. We've seen it before. That Texas A&M team that beat Bama 2 years ago
was way worse than this team.
Pretty marginal team, 8-4. They were okay, but Bama obviously came within 4 minutes of winning a national championship. So there's no comparison between the two teams. And then, the A&M team with Connor Wegman at quarterback last year in Tuscaloosa was throwing the ball in the end zone from the 5-yard line to win the game, and they went 5-7. So, that could be. I will stay with my 10-2 pick for the Tide. That's what I was preseason. So I'll stick with that. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with. If Jalen Milroe doesn't throw 2 awful picks, I still believe Texas is better. They would have squeaked through, but obviously that would have dramatically changed the game. Now, I'm not one to say you take points and plays off the board. They have to clean that up. He's either going to be a mess and make those critical kind of mistakes. When I say a mess, he played okay, but you can't make, if you're going to be a championship team, you can't have your quarterback, i.e. Stetson Bennett, early in his career when he was playing well, but making 2 or 3 critical mistakes against the good opponents on the schedule. And Georgia was losing to Florida and Bama. Same thing with Jalen Milroe. They got to clean that up. They got to figure out, is he going to develop to the point where we can coach him out of these mistakes? Or if not, are we going to have Tyler Buckner or Ty Simpson, who's supposed to be the best passer of the three, that Greg McElroy actually expected to win the job coming out of camp? Are one of those two going to be the better option?
Well, and the thing is, this is the difference between a great offensive coordinator like Steve Sarkisian and then a good one. I think Tommy Rees is a run-and-mill offensive coordinator in college football. I don't think he's great. He called that game completely wrong. I think you and I and multiple other people said, like, Jalen Milroe isn't a great passer, and they had 2 designed runs the entire game. 2. That is Jalen Hurts back there in college. You need to be running that guy 10 to 15 times a game. That's ridiculous to me. That's also, you relied on the running game when, if you watch Texas, they realized, oh, we can't run the ball. So guess what Steve Sarkisian did? He threw it east and west, softened them up, and then hit them deep. Alabama did none of that. Alabama just said, we're bigger, we're better, we're going to run it at you with our running backs. And then when that failed, let's just throw deep. And none of that worked. After that first quarter, the line of scrimmage was easily won by Texas. Like, I went back and watched it. We dominated the line of scrimmage. And it's like, if you're relying on that, you can still win most of your SEC games because you do have bigger, better offensive and defensive lines than most of those teams, other than probably 2 on the schedule. But if you just changed up a little bit and ran Jalen Milroe more and relied more on him as a runner, I think you can still compete for the SEC championship. But I don't know if they're going to do that.
No, it's a great call that you make right there. And maybe I would have been a little bit more dialed in on that, but I was watching like 3 games at the same time. But I will liken it to watching Nebraska, Colorado, which I still was watching 3 games at the same time, but I was a little bit more dialed in on this. Jeff Sims, not comparing him to Jalen Milroe, because I think Jalen Milroe is going to be a better quarterback than Jeff Sims, because Jeff Sims, we're looking at a guy that has started since game 1 of the 2020 season. He has been a starting quarterback since that long. And the only time he's been on the bench is when he's been injured. So he's basically been a starting quarterback for going on 4 years now. And at halftime of that game, they're losing 13-0 at halftime. And I came on here, I did a quick halftime hit, and I said, this is what you do. Here's a guy who has dropped 2 snaps. You know, we see quarterbacks all the time. They've got the athleticism to like catch the ball. These guys like basically handle a football every day for hours. They can pluck the football out of you see it all the time from quarterbacks. Yeah. Like it's nothing. He had 2 hit him right in the belt buckle and he fumbled him. They called for the snap at the wrong time, hit the guy in motion. And then the worst deed was, this is at the point that I thought either Matt Rule is sticking with this guy too long or he has nothing on the bench, because Jeff Sims rolls right and he's just looking at the guy while he's rolling the whole time, waiting. Then he throws it, and not surprisingly, a linebacker steps in front and picks the ball off and goes for pick 6. And so I'm saying at halftime, I'm looking at last week's box score because I watched the Minnesota game, and I'm like, this is the guy that you ran him 19 times for 91 yards against a better Minnesota defense. Why? They called 0 run plays for him in the first half. They're trying to drop him back in the pocket and have him dissect the defense. What are you doing? And then when you do throw the ball, you make it what he doesn't have to make any decisions. You know, little pop passes, little slip screens, little delayed screens, just swing it out to the back. No decisions to be made. That's how you run your offense with a guy like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the problem I see with a lot of coaches and offensive coordinators. They have a system, but then they're not willing to adapt that system for the players they have, which makes no sense to me. Until you get your guys in there, I understand. But like, you got to run a system. Like Jeff Sims, your quarterback. Guess what you should do? You should run an offense that he's capable of running. You shouldn't be saying, you're going to run this, you're going to run this, you're going to run this. And he clearly cannot run that offense.
And I understand if you're some big time offensive coordinator, you want to run the exotic stuff that you've schemed all off season to run. But hey, if the guy can't run it, then the aim is to score points and win games.
Well, yeah. And do you think Casey Thompson transferred out of there, or like because he was like scared of Matt Rule, or Matt Rule didn't want him? Because I saw this on Twitter and it was kind of a good point. Charlie Brewer, I mean, suffered so many concussions because it seems like Matt Rule just doesn't care. He uses his quarterback as a battering ram sometimes. And maybe that's why he hasn't been doing that with Jeff Sims. Honestly, maybe he did learn. But Casey Thompson could have saw that and been like, I'm not going to be used like that. Adios. Like, could that be the case? Or do you think he didn't want it?
That's a great point, because when Sims transferred, my initial thought was, I had no reason to compare the two quarterbacks before then, but I thought Casey Thompson's a better quarterback than Jeff Sims. That's my initial thought. I watched him play enough. That's my evaluation. Then I had Zach Smith on here, who said that he has coaching friends there, and he said Jeff Sims is going to win this quarterback battle. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, Jeff Sims is their quarterback. And sure enough, boom, within days, Casey Thompson's gone. He left. And I thought, okay, I guess he's a better quarterback. I know he's a better athlete as a runner, but nobody can convince me that Casey Thompson can't throw a football better than, well, better than I do. The first time I saw Casey Thompson was that Alamo Bowl game against Colorado. And I'm like, not putting him at this level by any stretch, but there were comparisons to a poor man's Matthew Stafford. Like, I'm seeing this guy kind of go here, just do whatever he needed to from different arm angles. And I'm like, I'm pretty impressed with this guy.
And Jeff Sims has put nothing on tape close to that game. Nothing.
No.
I mean, that's the thing too. Like, no offense to coaches, they do get it wrong. Like, I've seen multiple guys be put on the bench at the quarterback position where it's like, you had this guy starting, that makes no sense. Like, that's actually the one position I don't trust coaches at the most, honestly, because I've seen it happen multiple times where you really chose that guy over this guy. That makes no sense. And I think there's a lot of politics into that. I think there's a lot of this guy's better in practice or can read the whiteboard better or whatever, not actual gameplay. I mean, that happened with Vince Young when he was at Texas. I know he got benched because he wasn't good in practice. Well, guess what? Games are way different than practice. So maybe Casey Thompson's better in the game than Jeff Sims is.
You know what's insane, Matthew, and I pick on this guy from time to time, and I have great respect for him as a head coach. Kirk Ferentz. Okay, we know the lunacy that's going on there offensively. Well, on top of that, he makes the comment during a news conference last year when somebody asked him about having a mobile quarterback, if he was immune to this, that he didn't want a mobile quarterback. And he makes some ridiculous statement about, yeah, we don't want a guy that just is going to improvise and do this and that. And I'm like, if there's an offense that needs a guy that can make a play on his own, it's that offense.
Yeah, with the bootlegs you run, it's like if the one or two reads isn't there, guess what he could do? He can take off and run.
Yeah. So you've got this dormant offense, plus you are committed to having a pocket passer who's terrible and that can give you nothing else. And you're completely limited. You know how many times you could extend a drive with a third down conversion because of that? And here's a coach whose best success as a coach was his first big time quarterback was Brad Banks, almost won the Heisman Trophy. And so he's experienced it. So why would you not want this guy again? I don't know.
Well, do you know if Hudson Card got to Purdue before Jeff Sims got to Nebraska? Because that's another thing. Like,
oh, yes.
My God.
I'd much rather have
Hudson.
Absolutely.
Even I think there's a debate. I know Iowa fans like Cade, but I think Hudson Card would be fantastic in that system. He's very athletic. So I think people sleep on him. It sucks that he went to Purdue. No offense to Purdue fans. I know Michael's on here sometimes, but he's too good. Like, he's not a Texas quarterback, but he's not a Purdue quarterback. Can we put him in a middle of the road between those two? That's good enough.
Matthew, I get your point, but do you understand that Purdue's got a long list of great Hall of Fame quarterbacks?
They got lucky with Drew Brees. Let's see who else they have. But
we're talking about arguably the best, and I know I know exactly what you're talking about. Drew, Purdue's at their best going 7-5 and going to bowl games. That's who they are. That's what they do. And at their worst, they get lost for close to 10 years of going 3-9.
Yeah, after Drew Brees, they were terrible.
But Drew Brees, Bob Greasy, Gary Danielson, Mike Phipps, Kyle Orton, Curtis Painter.
I know he was. I know. I used to root for the Colts because I'm a Peyton Manning fan, and woo, not not the best backup quarterback you could get. But yeah, he did make the NFL, and that's hard to do. So I'm not going to crap on him, obviously. But yeah, that's better than a lot of teams' resumes. But I do want to talk on this point about Bama. So I was interested, and I thought this was the case. So I went back and looked at the 2020 coaching staff, last national championship, the 2017, another national championship, in 2015.
Yep.
There is a precipitous drop off in these coaching staffs. Like 2015 is insane. We're talking Josh Lupoy, who was also on 2017, Burton Burns. Those guys, Lupoy's at Oregon. Burns is the running backs coach for the New York Giants. Kirby Smart, ever heard of him? Head coach at Georgia. Lane Kiffin, head coach at Ole Miss. Mario Cristobal, head coach at Miami. Sorry. Mel Tucker was the head coach of Michigan State. Oregon, Dan Lanning, he was a GA on that staff, is the head coach at Oregon. Billy Napier is the head coach at Florida, as the wide receivers coach. And then it gets just a little bit worse in 2017. And then 2020 is good. It's solid. It's Steve Sarkisian, offense coordinator, head coach at Texas. Jeff Banks, tight end coach at Texas. Kyle Flood, offensive line coach at Texas. So I think that has a lot to do with Texas' success, because I think this is the last great coaching staff he's had, honestly. And then Charles Kelly, DC at Colorado. I think he'll get that thing going when they have the right players. And Charles Huff, also the running backs coach, who is the head coach at Marshall. I think that has a lot to do with it. Eventually you run out of those guys. Like, if they're successful, they stay where they're at. And also the transfer portal has helped that too, where you see guys who are third string on Alabama can't really see the field because the two guys in front of them are really good, are transferring somewhere else. But there really isn't that. And that's why Alabama was so good in the past, is there wasn't that much of a drop off, but now those guys aren't staying in the program. So to me, those are the two biggest things. I don't know if you agree with that, disagree with that, or what your perspective is on that.
Well, I've not done the deep dive like you into the assistant coaches, but just looking at the coordinators, it's a couple curious selections with Kevin Steele, who's got a nice resume, a great history, but I don't necessarily know that he hasn't lost his fastball. I think that, he's had better days in his coaching career. And then, of course, Tommy Rees, again, I just throw up my hands thinking, was he that great of an interview? Could he convince Nick Saban that I just didn't have the personnel like I have here, which is true to a certain extent. But I don't know what Tommy Rees really did to convince Nick Saban, other than maybe Nick Saban wanted somebody that he could just kind of not have to fight with, like a Lane Kiffin or a strong personality. Steve Sarkisian wanted somebody who's just going to just run my offense and do it my way. And we don't have the quarterback to open things up. So play conservative. And, that's what they've been doing at Notre Dame for the last 10 years. So we'll bring this guy in.
Yeah. I mean, 2015, you have 6 head coaches on your coaching staff.
Crazy.
I mean, and that's
successful guys too.
Yeah, they're all of them. I mean, they'd all still be hired, other than Billy Napier is the only one right now on the hot seat. And Mel Tucker, obviously, what happened with him, I think he kind of got railroaded so far, what I've heard out of that. But he wasn't doing great the last couple of years. But I mean, they're all good guys, and then you have guys that are in the NFL off this staff that are staying in the NFL. So that's definitely the biggest thing to me. And then the quarterback, I mean, it's just a drop off. It is. No offense to Jalen Milroe. I don't think he's out of, if we're ranking, there's 133 Division I college football teams. He's probably in the 40 to 60. He might even not be that. He might be higher. He might be 30 to 50, but he's somewhere in between there. And that's not a Mac Jones who's top 5, a Tua who's top 5, so on and so forth. The Jalen Hurts, who's a top 10 quarterback in college football when he plays. So that's the biggest drop off, because their wide receivers actually made some great catches versus Texas. Like, I was impressed. They played pretty well. The offensive line obviously was dominated, but there's talent there. And the main guy that was dominated was Kane Proctor, and he's a freshman. He's going to be a very good player. So I think this demise is a little bit unwarranted, but there is going to be a drop off. I do agree with what Greg McElroy said. They're just not going to win national championships year in and year out. And let's be honest here, that was a once in 100 years type thing anyways. His winning percentage in those type of games was insane. I mean, It's just not, it wasn't sustainable. So if they take the step back and they're 10-2 ever for 1 or 2 years in a row, and then they win a national championship every 5 to 6 years, that's still great. So
yeah, if they are able to do that, they're basically the last 10 years version of Ohio State, Clemson, or Georgia. So it's not sustainable. Nobody's ever done that in the history of college football. Win a national championship every other season, 6 in 12 years. That's incredible.
And he was in it, what, 9 out of those 12, 10? It was
Yeah,
9 or
let's see.
10.
Yeah, they lost in 16 to Clemson was the first time they lost the BCS championship game or a national championship game. So they lost and then they lost to Clemson, I guess. Then they lost to Georgia. Yeah.
So you're in
Uh,
at 75% of national championships games over 12 years. Yeah, that's not sustainable.
Yeah. Anytime anyone has asked me on here, which has been 50 times, whether Nick Saban can keep it up or if his replacement can keep it up, or if Dabo Sweeney's going to keep up what he was doing between 2015 and 20, I say this is the easiest answer in the world. I don't even have, it's not a criticism on those guys, but you're not going to keep up playing in national championship games all the time and winning 91 or 2% of your games.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean like you fell off from your standard. But if let's say Nick Saban for the next 5 years goes 10-2, 4 out of those 5, and then the 1 year wins a national championship, that's still going to be better than 99% of other coaches in the sport. Maybe Kirby Smart does that. Maybe Ryan Day does that. Maybe if Jim Harbaugh's still there does that, but I doubt it. It's just one of those things. People have it's just like LeBron James, Michael Jordan, those guys in basketball. They have this such a high standard, and everyone holds them to that and holds no one else to that. Just hold them to the standard of a great college football coach, and it's not close still. Like Nick Saban's still probably going to go 10-2 this year. They're still going to go to whatever big bowl game, kill whoever they play, just like they killed Kansas State, and be one of the 8 best teams in the sport. So, and everyone wants to just crap all over them because they lost versus, in my opinion, we're going to end up probably being a top 6-7 team at the end of the year. I don't really understand why people do that. It's not going to happen in our lifetime again. So you might as well just enjoy it.
We have a negative society. That's one thing. It brings more attention when people criticize rather than praise. And it's also a gold medal mentality in this country, which I completely get. I understand that you want to be the best, and second best isn't good enough, and third best isn't good enough, and losing the Super Bowl is not good enough. The Buffalo Bills 4 consecutive times. So it's a gold medal mentality. But think about it. Yeah, any fan listening to us right this second, would you go 10-2, 11-1, 5 years, and win 1 national championship? Would you take that? Now, if you're a Georgia fan, I get you saying, you know what, we'll push our chips and that we'll do better. But don't be surprised if that falls off at some point, to that. And I know Ohio State fans believe that they're going to win a national championship every year, but they haven't been. So they go 11-1 every year, basically. So yeah, it's and then that's the list.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing, like people just don't realize, like as a Texas fan, we went from the 2000-2009 period. We were great. 2 national championship appearances, won 10 games every year, basically 11 if you average it out. And guess what happened? We fell off. You know what we would do to sign up for that again? Like that's going to happen every program. You're going to have at least a half a decade where you're just not going to be that good. And those times come a lot faster than you think. And that's the funny thing. You said that about Georgia 2 years ago. They would have signed their soul away for that deal.
Yeah, to win a title.
Yeah, but just don't get greedy. Realize what it takes to be at this level, and realize there's only like honestly 5 to 7 teams every year, maximum maybe 8 or 9 that could win a national championship. I think this is actually, I wanted to revisit this on you. So we talked in the offseason. You said, like I said, there were 9 or 10 teams that I believe could win a national title. I think you said like 5 or 6. Has your opinion changed on that at all? Or you still only think 5 or 6?
My opinion has slightly changed because, it's changed somewhat because I didn't put Florida State or Texas in that group. And it's not like me to change my mind based on one game, one result. But they were both dominant enough to kind of change my mind that I think it's possible for either one of those two as well.
So who's on your list then for that?
And I'll just say one other thing, that if either one of them or both of them had won like really great games and still, hey, credit for the win, but 31-28, just complete toss up, somebody had to win kind of game. But no, they both were clearly the better team in both of those games. So right now, in order, if we're going to take the schedule and the opportunity, I just think Georgia they have such an opportunity with their schedule. They're basically sitting in the playoffs today. Like
Yeah.
they have to screw it up not to make the playoff. I would go. I have a difficult time with Michigan because Michigan, I think, had I made a safe pick in the preseason, I would have said Georgia, Michigan, because I think Michigan's by far the safest pick in the Big Ten. But I'll say in order of winning a national championship, after Georgia, boy, I almost have to put a tier of Ohio State, Michigan. I'm still going to put Alabama, Texas, Florida State on that. I'll put Penn State on that tier as well.
I think Washington's on that tier.
I got to see Washington beat somebody.
Yeah, I get that. I think US. I mean, that offense.
Yeah, their
uh,
offense is crazy.
I mean, it's better than any he's ever had. It's insane. I got to watch him firsthand. He's got a better quarterback than he's ever had. Zachariah Branch is insane. I thought Xavier Worthy was really good as freshman year. That guy is woo.
Yeah,
I think
I want to see two things out of USC. I want to see them play Colorado just for the sheer joy of just watching craziness and points all over the place. And just, it's going to be a great story. And it could be like 55-42 or something. Then the other would be, I want to see them play their first legitimate defense, which, the Oregons and the Washingtons have the talent, but I think Notre Dame's probably, maybe Utah, the best defense on their schedule, to see them play and see how much they get held in check. Not that they're going to get held down, but if they score 31, then maybe those teams can beat them.
And then I guess this will probably be my last question. Have you been impressed by Drew Aller or no?
I had the West Virginia game on. I can't say that I really diagnosed him, but I saw enough last year to be impressed with him. Yeah, I think he's really good.
Do you think Penn State can win the Big Ten?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I at the beginning, I thought it was going to be Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. I don't know about McCord. Obviously, we'll find out. But, I mean, honestly, versus the Notre Dame, and we're going to find out a lot about both those teams because I don't know. The North Carolina State game would have been interesting, but then you have that weather delay, and I think that just took all the air out of it for North Carolina State. I think that really hurt them. So that's probably the most excited Ohio State game. I live in Ohio, obviously, and it's going to be fun to watch that game. It really is. I think it's going to be a really good game.
We're going to come out of that game, and there are still going to be doubt by a lot of people, including myself, that if Ohio State goes in there and wins, that's going to be a huge win. But it's still going to be like, well, they beat Notre Dame all the time. And is Notre Dame really an elite team? Or are they just like a top 12 team? And then the other way around, it will be an enormous win for Notre Dame. I don't know when the last time they would have won a regular season game. It's been forever. But people are going to say, this Ohio State team's not that what they usually are.
So if you had to put money down, though, this will actually be my last question. Who do you think, Georgia or the field for the national championship?
Oh, I take the field.
Okay. That's the first time you could say that probably in 2 years, I would say, maybe. I don't know, because that Georgia 2021 team that defense was insane. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think that'd be a good video. Obviously, you're super busy, so I don't know. But, like, the tier list for national championship teams, because I think this year there's a lot of teams competing.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And but for all that Georgia's accomplished, and they haven't lost a regular season game since 2020 against Florida and Bama that year.
Yeah.
For as good as they've been, with Mechie and Jameson Williams on the field in the national championship game, Bama's in the lead with about 5 minutes left in that game.
Yeah.
And Bryce Young's replacement receivers, Ja'Cory Brooks, those guys really let him down. And of course, we know Ohio State was very close. So all credit to Georgia. Georgia fans, if you're listening to me, just understand the argument here. I'm just saying that those were both pretty close, like razor close to winning a national championship.
Yeah. What's crazy is you may not know anything about Carson Beck until he gets to the SEC championship game. That's insane that he could go through a whole season. You may not know anything.
In
Whereas
the
like,
SEC.
yeah, every other team you're going to know. Like Drew Allar will have his test. JJ McCarthy, I think there's still questions because I want to see him put in a mode where he has to throw a bunch. I've yet to see him succeed. I mean, the Ohio State game, if you go back and watch that, there was a lot of lucky stuff that happened in that game for him to complete a lot of those passes, in my opinion. So I want to see him put in a situation. And then same with Kyle McCord. Quinn Ewers, I think, passed his test pretty well, but the like Carson Beck could go through a whole season and we not know anything about him, which is insane. And I think that worries Kirby Smart too. I think at some point in one of these games, he should just open it up and try to throw as much as he can because you're just going to kill everybody you play. I don't see South Carolina this week. Their offensive line is so bad.
Yeah.
So bad. Spencer Rattler may get murdered in that game. Like, unless someone turns it around, I don't really see a test. Tennessee, maybe. Milton, man. I just don't know. We'll see.
Somebody usually jumps up and
Yeah.
at least scares whoever the best team is, whether it could also be Auburn. I know it doesn't look that way, but it could be.
Now, Hugh Freeze always has a couple tricks up his sleeve, but I was like, people were high on Kentucky, and then you go and play like that versus who they play, Eastern or Western Kentucky, and they didn't look very good at all. Devin Leary doesn't look very good at all.
No, he doesn't. He's off to an awful start.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what happens, but it's fun. It really is. Like, I think I read the first time that top 5 teams.
Don't know what you're high about. I don't know what that's concerning.
I don't know either. But that was pretty funny. The first time in like 15 years that every conference was represented in the top 5. So it's the most wide open college football has been in a long time. I think it's going to be a fun season. Hopefully it can be close to 2007 level because that might be the best college football season ever.
Like this kind of question or statement, I don't really understand because people's expectations of teams, I guess, again, sometimes when people get on here and say so-and-so sucks and they suck and they suck and they're crap. And then I think, okay, well, there's only 3 teams in the nation that aren't crap according to your standards. And this is kind of where I place this. Our buddy Mike Fort, Tennessee is just the least crappy of the I guess there aren't that many good teams in America. If Tennessee's not a good team, then I don't know how many good teams there are. 10?
No,
maybe?
If you wanted to say they're not great, that's fine, but they're definitely a good team. Like, I think any team that's a top 30 team in the country is a good football team. So there's plenty of good teams to me. I do agree with the gold medal thing that you said earlier. I think Texas was making fun of TCU for putting up a banner of making the college football playoff. There's no issue with that, in my opinion. I think that stuff should be celebrated. Just like I like when that's what I do like about college basketball. They celebrate like Elite 8. To me, once you make that, you should be celebrated. That's really hard to do, is be one of the best 8 teams in the country. It's really hard to do to be one of the best 4 teams in college football. So that should be celebrated, and you should take that is a win, in my opinion. That's better than being like the 9th best team and playing and winning an Orange Bowl or something like that. It's way harder to get into the college football playoff and make one of those games. So that should be celebrated.
Oh, you can go to a lot of these stadiums and they've got, to your point, Orange Bowl champions, 1976 or whatever. So what's the difference? You made the college football playoff. That's more difficult to do.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to jump off. I am not high. But thanks for talking with me, Mark.
Of course, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Got Texas Tuesdays with Matthew you got it, Tuesday, 7:30. Appreciate it, Matthew. And yes, again, Matthew with Texas Tuesdays. You got to join him right there. It's on the Big 12 channel. So we got to drop the link. And also on our Texas channel. So the SD1 Sports Texas channel and the Big 12 channel on Tuesday nights. And if you're not aware, we drop a schedule every day on the community tab here at the Voice of College Football. We post our live schedule. You can follow all the other day we had 9 live shows. I think on Wednesday we had 9 live streams here at the Voice of College Football. So you can track the schedule right there every day. All right. Top 25 that actually makes sense. I did this every week last year where I would get on Monday and address the top 25 that actually makes sense in everybody's comments. Not done that this year. Wanted to do that today. We will probably get to that. I did find this interesting. Somebody pointed this out to me that Andy Staples, who I'm neither going to uh, criticize or confirm his work. I know the name. He must do a good job. He's at On3. He's a respected college football guy. Don't want to say again one way or the other because I don't take in his content to know. But somebody passed this along to me because Andy Staples stated that that he was asked to do a top 5 resume ranking. Sounds familiar. A rank based only on what teams have done this season. That's how I voted in the AP poll, and I forgot how mad it makes people. It's an instructive exercise. We'll start doing it every week. So he's basically doing what I've done for 5 years, something like that. Texas, Florida State, Notre Dame, Duke, Miami. Something very close to my top 25 that actually makes sense, except we extended to 25. There has been certainly another framework in which I presented at times that's kind of blown people's minds. There we go. I believe Matthew has left us the latest in the Big 12 in the Texas Tuesdays. So the link that I just dropped in the chat should be the link to Texas Tuesdays, the last show produced this past week after the big Bama win. Top 25 that actually makes sense. Where was I? We started that about 5 or 6 years ago because I was just flabbergasted by the stupidity in the AP poll of ignoring the results over and over and over and over. And so we started to deliver the top 25 that actually makes sense. This is why I shouldn't do things while I'm in the middle of a sentence because I forget where I'm headed after that. So people actually, as you all know, don't really understand what we're doing there. But the randomness of the 25, actually, the 25, the number 25 amuses me that people are so hung up on 25. So there's nothing magical about there being 25 teams ranked. And actually, if you look at the AP poll or the coaches poll, think about this. When you watch the games and you see the little ranking next to the team, that ranking should actually go as many spots down as received votes. There's nothing that happened in the poll between numbers 25 and 26. There's actually no distinction that is any different than between 17 and 18 or between 1 and 2. It's just another vote total. So why don't they put number 26, number 27? Because in fact, those are not, it is a complete farce that those teams are not ranked. They are ranked. They ranked them. They just didn't put a number next to their name, but they're ranked. They're all ranked all the way down to whichever team got the least number of votes. They are also ranked in reality. Let's look at this. This is ridiculous. This is, this hit me the other day and I thought, well, this ranking situation is even more ridiculous than I've played it out to be in the past. Because again, if you look at it, let's look at the AP poll. There it is. The wonderful AP Top 25. Georgia's number 1 for doing what? For defeating Tennessee Martin and Ball State. Great. They're number 1. Why? Because they're the national champion. Oh, they were the national champion last year. That's why they're number 1 now. Okay, we all know that makes no sense. All right, beyond that, and Ohio State slipped another spot. Fine. I have no issue with Ohio State being number 6. Actually, I don't even have Ohio State ranked. I'm such a homer. I don't even have them ranked. So here's my point, and I hope to God that I explain this correctly because it should be obvious. Let's go to the bottom of the rankings. Iowa is number 25 with 106 points in the poll. Clemson's next at 86. Okay. Clemson is next with 86. What does this tell us? Clemson should be number 26 in the country. There is no distinction between them and Iowa and UCLA and Washington State and everybody else. Arkansas is 27, TCU is 28, Kansas is 29, Tulane is 30, Wisconsin's 31. Wisconsin is number 31 for losing to Washington State by 9 and beating Buffalo. Okay. And on and on and on and on and on and on there. Wyoming beat Texas Tech and they beat somebody else, didn't they? Aren't they 2-0? Maybe not. James Madison, they're 2-0. Oklahoma State's 2-0. Maryland is 2-0. These teams have done nothing, but they are 2-0. All right. So why has TCU got a bunch of votes? You know why? Because they had votes in the preseason. They lost to Colorado and beat some horrible team last week. This is just, it's the stupidest thing in the world. The ranking should be, when they say Clemson's unranked this week, no, they're not. They're ranked 26th. It is beyond stupidity. It is just the stupidest thing in the world. The more I think about it, the more I just shake my head at this, or my mind's about to explode at the stupidity of saying Clemson's unranked, for example. No. They're next in line. They have votes, just like Iowa does, just like UCLA. All right. Yes, I need a soapbox, John. Let me trade in my YouTube channel for a soapbox. All right. The top 25 that actually makes sense. Let's see what some of these folks have to say. This is amusing as well. So what we have here is we can show the actual rankings here. And let's also understand when we look at this that number one, I have never professed for this that it's perfect. It can be argued. Of course, there are assumptions that need to be made and all of that. So these rankings are not perfect, but you know what? They make sense. They're logical. So not perfect. So that's our latest top 25 that actually makes sense. And then we also have, let's see if I can find the response. By the way, Clemson fans, our Clemson shows going on right now over on the Clemson channel. But let's find the comments because they are beautiful. See, I'm going to have to cut there we go. All right, what do we got? Okay. Jeffrey, appreciate your comment there. We'll bypass you. We know you've got a friendly comment there. Thank you for that. Immaculate 5784. Wow, not sure if I would come up with the same order by using this methodology, but you nailed it with your methodology. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I understand if you use the same methodology, you may come up with something slightly different. 5 might be 7 and 11 might be 9, and absolutely it's that close, especially when we're talking about 2 games. And there are assumptions that have to be made. And understand that what starts to become a little bit complex is as the season unfolds, not only do I have to look at the games that particular week and the records of all those teams and the teams they played, but I have to readjust everybody that they played. So the Florida State week 1 win against LSU, if LSU's at 6-3 after 9 games, is going to look a little bit different than it does right now, considering most of us believe that LSU is a top 10 type of team. KMS Bean. So my ranking, which are based on who you beat, more points for beating better teams, and by far I mean ranked higher the previous week. And for week 1, I used last year's final standings. Well, if you use last year's final standings, okay, that's better than using rankings. Okay. So he's got Colorado 1, Duke 2, Florida State 3, San Diego State 4. Okay, I can't really go along with that. San Diego State at 4. They beat Ohio. Wait a minute. They lost to UCLA. Okay, you lost me there. San Diego State lost to UCLA by 25 points. All right. So next we've got top 25 that actually makes sense. Dramatic pause is a must. Johnny Bass, thank you for that. Adam, always commenting. Thank you for that, Adam. ACC is the most impressive conference. Yes. Clemson alum 98, same thing. Will's Abillo 5367. So this is a fun comment. So he's not taking it too seriously here. So he understands the process. Georgia fan. I could understand Mr. Georgia fan going, "You're an idiot. Why aren't we ranked?" I've got Georgia at like 24. But this guy gets it. All right, it's fine. Yeah. I guess Matt Bash wants me to rank Oregon higher because they scored 81 points. All right. Okra Joe, Colorado, Duke, and FSU definitely had the best opening wins. Snow Dolphin, punishment for bad opposition. Yes, I get it. I had somebody comment last week that based on my system, Georgia will never crack the top 25 because they won't play anyone. Well, you understand other teams will lose. Even if Georgia was playing the worst schedule in the country, they will be ranked high as a, let's say, 8-0 team because there are going to be hardly any other 8-0 teams or strong 7-1 teams. I don't know how to pronounce your handle, but thank you for the comment. I enjoy the list every year and laugh at the people freaking out early on the rankings. But what's a better win? 30-3 over a team that finished 6th in the American Conference, not the ACC, but the American Conference, or team that won 23-3 over a Big Ten opponent. Got it. Michigan, Ohio State. Thank you for that. S. Van Kruisberg says that no team with a losing record should be ranked. I did have Bama ranked. Well, they don't have a losing record. They're 1-1. Johnny Bass with his playoff pick. Excuse me. Perfect sense. 32-40. Michigan will sit below number 10 on this list until they are about 9-0. Probably not true. No, I don't see that at all. Michigan does have Maryland and Penn State fairly. Well, I guess they do play Penn State late, but they're going to be higher than 10 if they're undefeated. Again, everybody's going to be losing games. Everybody except for about 3 teams in the country usually arrive to week 9 and 10 with losses. There's usually about 3 undefeated teams by that point. Traveling on, see, these people don't understand the process. By the end of the year, it will turn out there's only one good team in college football. It will go undefeated, but because it didn't play anybody, it will be ranked last. Okay, not true. Okay, I don't know what games this guy was watching. Apparently, just the Michigan game. JSE 123. Michigan had the dominant win out of the field next to Florida State. Okay, you may want to check other games. Yeah, we got Miami ranked. They're ranked rather high. I forget where. I've got Miami at 8. Travisely. I mean, overall, it's a flawed ranking, obviously, but it means your intent you described, so not bad. Okay. Yes. There's no such thing as a not flawed ranking. So let's dismiss that from our minds. There's no such thing as a ranking that is not flawed. Just by the very nature of ranking teams that don't play each other, it's got to be flawed. Even if every team in the country played every team, it would still be flawed because you would have A defeating B, who defeated C, who defeated D, but they're 8-2 and they're also 8-2. So how do you rank them against each other? Gracie says, I agree with all of this except for just one. Illinois should not be on there. In Oregon should be. Illinois. Good Lord. Did I pull up the wrong top 25? Was this after 1 week, maybe? No, 9 days ago. I guess it would have been. I must have pulled up the week before. Why did it give me the week before? All right, the week before. My bad. September 10th, right? September 10th. There it is. Now I don't know which is which. Call the show, folks. The link is in the chat. And also, I will drop it again. Would love to take some calls from all of you. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about week 3 because I've got my say. All right. The link is in the chat. I apologize. It was not listed in the description section. The real MVP says, why is Louisville not ranked? Because Georgia Tech's no good, and they beat them by 5 points, and they played Murray State. So let's say Louisville. Let's throw this list up here. Louisville, I remember looking at them. I did not put them on the next 5 even. That contains Iowa, Minnesota, UCF, Ohio State, and Rutgers. Yeah. I would just have to say that if you look at any team on the list above number 25 onward, they just have more impressive wins than Louisville. Georgia completely trucked their 2 opponents. I know they don't compare to Georgia Tech, but if Louisville would have been somewhat controlling that game, a little game control out of that one, Oregon State just bludgeoned their 2 opponents. Michigan, the same thing. K-State, the same thing. And they beat a Troy team that's certainly in the realm of competing in the Power Five as a team that had won 13 consecutive games. And I could go through the list. But yeah, Louisville need to do a little bit more work. BW, maybe with a little underlying meaning there, top 69. We can do that. You want a top 69? It might get more clicks. I think, BW, you have uncovered something for us all here at the Voice of College Football, that we may get a few more clicks if we do a top 69. We could do a top 69 and a bottom 69. How about that? Actually, the random numbers, that's what I should do. This week, let's do it. This week, we are not having a top 25 that actually makes sense. We are going to have a top blank that actually makes sense, because we want to get people out of the thinking that there's something magical about ranking 25 teams. Actually, if this was done fairly and equitably, then every team would get ranked. Because think about it. Right now, we've got this major block in everyone's mind that, oh, they beat a ranked team. They didn't beat a ranked team. Okay. Last year. Where's the top 25 from last year? Let's go to the top 25 at the end of last season. And we can clearly find teams that are just as good as the teams that were ranked in the top 25. This is easy to see. So let's go to the bottom of the rankings. Okay. Fresno State went 10-4. They're a group of 5 team. This has been proven zillions of times. Zillions of times. It is a rarity that a group of 5 team is better than a Power 5 team with even a record 3 games below. There probably should not be a group of 5 team that is ranked that didn't go at least 11-2. Now, there are some exceptions at times, but man, I got to find some. But to have Pitt 22 and Fresno State 24 with virtually the same record, we could go through a million examples, believe me. Just the 5-7 Texas team of Steve Sarkisian in 2021. Well, that same year, Louisiana under Billy Napier went 11-1, probably 12 or 13-1, 13-1 after their bowl win and winning the Sun Belt Conference. They went 13-1. They finished like 15th in the country. And Texas was 5-7. Texas beat them by 3 touchdowns. And I know you can pick one game, and I say this all the time when I get in arguments with people and I say, well, you're making an example out of one game. Okay, that's not the point. The point is I could keep doing that. I could keep throwing out examples of marginal Power 5 teams that have usually won big against the very top of the group of 5. So this ranking should probably not include any group of 5s except for Tulane, who finished number 9 in the country. Do we really believe if Tulane played the teams below them? See, it's difficult. It's difficult to rank the group of 5 teams. It just is. The schedules aren't comparable. All right. Here we go. UCLA finished 9-4. Pitt finished 9-4. What's wrong with that ranking? They played in the bowl game, and Pitt won. Okay. All right. Why are they ranked below UCLA? All right. Minnesota went 9-4. Minnesota went 9-4 in the Big Ten, and they had a better record than South Carolina and the same record as all these other teams, Notre Dame, Mississippi State, UCLA, and they're nowhere to be found. You know why? They're Minnesota. That's the only reason. They're Minnesota. Texas Tech went 8-5. Texas went 8-5. I don't remember who won the game. You know what? Bingo! Here's another one. Texas, number 25. Texas Tech, number whatever, 31. Texas Tech won the game between the two. They both went 8-5. Texas Tech beat a good Ole Miss team in its bowl game by a lot of points. So it just continues. And so we've got this block in our minds that, oh, well, they were ranked. They're not ranked. If we looked at the rankings, it's not really too productive to do it right now. We got to wait about 5 or 6 weeks, but we'll do this in like 5 or 6 weeks. We'll look at the rankings and we'll easily be able to find 15 teams that are just as good as the couple teams near the bottom of the rankings. So there's just this magic. Oh, well, they're ranked. They're not ranked. If you're going to rank teams, rank them all. Rank them 1 through 131. Because again, it's the same process and there should be no difference between the teams that didn't get ranked, but they're deserving just as much of a ranking. All right, I'll get off all this ranking business, but it's quite annoying. Top 25. Let's make sure this is the right one. We've got Craig, thank you for the compliment. Daniel, thank you. Dependent Fanatic, I value road wins more, but we are in the same ballpark. I do as well. Might not be necessarily whatever you're looking at there, may not show it in whatever comparison you're making. Clemson alum 98. Mark, I almost predicted your top 4. There you go. When people can predict what my rankings are going to be, that would make sense. Michael Steele, I agree. Florida State looks like the team to beat. Okay, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not telling you that Florida State's the team to beat. I'm just saying that they've got the best resume. Yes, Georgia. Great accomplishment for Kirby Smart. When we get to a certain point here at the Voice of College Football, we need to plant people at various places. Like College Game Day, we'll plant somebody with a banner, Voice of College Football. We'll go to different coaches' press conferences and we'll plant people and they can ask questions like, Coach Smart, what is your thought about being ranked number 23 in the top 25 that actually makes sense this week? I'm the one who ranked Florida State number 1. I not only said it, I did say it. Watch the video. Of course I said it. I read off my rankings. All right. All right. Dan's 1182. Let's explain the process to you. Appreciate the question. I don't expect people to show up and be like, "Oh, I get it," and they're done with it. Even though I try to explain it during the video. I must be a poor communicator. Dan's 1182 says, North Carolina beat South Carolina by 14 and needed double overtime to beat App State, but they are number 3 here. Yes, they've got a resume that says they have defeated the 3rd best composite opponents. What happens when Georgia demolishes USC next week? South Carolina. Well, South Carolina's Georgia's ranking is going to skyrocket depending on what everybody else does. See, this is another thing that we also don't go with, like you forged your place in line and so you stay there. That's another fallacy of the AP poll. These voters are getting much better, though, in recent years. So they're kind of, many of them are getting away from, well, if you're number 5 in the country, you keep winning, even if you're playing the crappiest teams in the country and you're winning 14-13 every week, you just sit there. No, got to reevaluate the whole thing every week. And in this case, yes, if Georgia demolishes South Carolina, that only confirms what I believe about Georgia, and that's that they're the best team in the country. So Georgia's going to, again, depending on what everybody else does, they're going to move up considerably. North Carolina would, in this case, if Georgia really demolishes South Carolina, I've got to compare the North Carolina win against South Carolina to the Georgia win against South Carolina. And obviously, just based on that, Georgia would be much higher than North Carolina based on that one game. But North Carolina is also going to have, at that point, a win against App State and Minnesota. So, hypothetically, depending on what else is going on, North Carolina is going to maintain a rankings edge over Georgia, because that was still a significant and dominant win. That was not North Carolina winning on a last-second field goal against South Carolina. Plus, they're going to just have a much better resume than Georgia. So that's what I'm going to do. Jay Petro 85. Mark, I like your number 4, number 5 on the top 25. I think the 4 playoff teams will be Texas, Michigan, Georgia, the last but not least, Duke. Wouldn't that be something? Oh, would that not be something? Duke in the playoff. I would love it. Collins says North Carolina almost lost. Alabama did lose, not understanding those ones. And I get it. It was difficult. I could have played it safe and said, well, Alabama's gone. We're going to go all 2-0 teams. But if I'm truly evaluating the other team, then I am looking at Alabama losing at home in a game that was still within reach with 5 or 6 minutes left. I'm looking at that as actually a better performance than a lot of other performances out there. That's a better performance to me than beating Austin Peay by 17 points. Johnny Bays, Texas 1, Florida State 2, Colorado 3, and Utah 4. I struggled a little bit with Utah because they did defeat another Power 5 team in Baylor. They did do it on the road. They did it with their backup quarterback, but my goodness, they were lucky to get out of there. Impressive win against Florida. We'll know more about Florida this week. So if Florida beats Tennessee, that Utah strength of schedule leaps considerably. And if Baylor, I don't know who they're playing, probably no one this week. But then the next week they'll play somebody at some point in the Big 12. Jordan, I get it, saying Alabama's number 13. If it's not based on last season, they already lost. Because again, I'm not just going to rank all the teams that won the game. I think that there are losses that are better than wins. Not technically, because if you play a bunch of crappy teams and win all your games, that's the goal, is to win the game. But to me, it's a better performance losing a close game to Texas than it is winning a bunch of other games. Johnny Bass is looking for a power ranking video. Well, we'll do that next week. We will do the top, whatever it is, the top 13 that actually makes sense. Maybe I'll just rank 2 teams. There's my ranking. Then I'll have all sorts of people going crazy. But I should do that, like rank 4 teams. But not 4, because that's the playoff. People will assume that's my playoff prediction or something. Here's your top 2 teams. Or here's just the number 1 team in the country. That's all that matters anyway, right? George. I disappointed a fool. The one place I did not think Alabama would be overrated, shaking his head. All right, stick with me. Hang in there. Great list. Sooner, Fannin TX. KMS Bean, his rankings based on how tough an opponent you beat, not how bad you beat them, just win, loss, and strength of opponent. Okay, well that's fine. I put the performance factor into it as well. UCLA's number one. They beat Coastal Carolina and San Diego State. You're telling me that's better than beating LSU, Alabama, South Carolina, and teams like that? All righty. HMB of 8404 says 25, 4, and 23 are really 1, 2, and 3. They got to be Pac 12 teams, I'm sure. Yes, Michigan, Oregon State, Georgia. Could be once they start playing some teams. Christopher believes I should be putting Michigan on notice because they've got Rutgers coming up. I believe that's the Big Ten opener. And Rutgers, of course, is ranked just behind Michigan. Smooth Criminal, thank you. Yes, D-Bell 29, Georgia 25 is hilarious. See, that's great. Don't mind those comments. It is funny. Mark, did you consider Cincinnati? Absolutely, I did. They won at Pitt. I still believe Pitt's a decent team. C.A. Macero, thank you. Christopher's proficiency rankings. We could go through those the rest of the night, everyone. We have Christopher's proficiency ratings. Should we go through those the rest of the night? Going once, going twice. Come on. Yes. All right. Yeah, these were released late. I had things going on last Sunday. And I'm getting weary of going through all these. So there are the many comments. Would love to have these people actually call the show. Yukon number one. I don't know why that is there, but that's great. David Portnoy. Abraham 786. You are so wrong. Okay, this is crazy. Perception and talent is very important. Proper grammar, Abraham. Perception and talent are very important. So this is my perception, right? Okay. Number two, talent. Well, the talent is what is the main component in producing the results. So this is, in a sense, a judgment of talent if the talent is performing. Father Guido, blah, 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 blah. Congrats. This is every bit as bad as the coach's poll because you don't understand. Ulrich, no, it did not make sense. Love when people tell me that and then they can't express themselves. All right. Wesley, wow, you just proved this video is more worthless than your opinions. Thanks for clearing it up in 4 minutes. All right, Wesley, thumbs up to you. Thunder Shadow, you're a homer like everyone else. I have no idea what that means, what that's pertaining to. Thank you, Johnny Bays. Johnny Bays sticking up for me there. Ohio State fan, they're not even ranked. Yes, I am the big homer. Meek 911, this list is completely pointless. Well, actually, whether you agree with it or not, at least you can't argue that it's pointless because at least I'm taking rationale and applying it. You may not like it. The coaches poll or the AP poll as well, those are the ones that are pointless because, like, Georgia's 2-0, they're number one. Why are they number one? Because they're Georgia. That's why they're number one. That's being pointless. Land found, something is wrong with you. So land found, let me point something out to you. Yes, there is something wrong with me. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with everyone. So there is something wrong with all of us. Yes, I'm not a perfect person. So there we go. All right, appreciate that, land found, for your discovery of human nature. Thank you for that revolutionary statement. Thank you so much. You're brilliant. Shane is asking whether Jim Harbaugh is going to win a bowl game this year. Well, I would think that Michigan fans would rather have him go to the college football playoff than like win the Liberty Bowl. But JSE, thank you for that. We just do our best. JSE, Mark is not too biased. Again, we're all biased. All right, folks, if you'd like to join the show, please do. We are leaving the link in the chat. And otherwise, I am going to run down week 3. Also, before we run down week 3, Amazon links in the description section. So I know I've never mentioned this before, but we have an Amazon link. What that is a link that connects you to Amazon, of course. Then you can do your shopping there. Grab that link, put it somewhere where you will remember it, not forget it. Just grab the Amazon link. It's in the description section of every video. Bingo. And again, I apologize for not mentioning this in the past about the Amazon link. I keep forgetting that. I'm going to start mentioning that every show. We've got an Amazon link. When you do your shopping at Amazon, grab it, put it somewhere where you will remember it. Join us on Patreon or on YouTube. So here's the deal, folks. We do not in any way want you to be in a bind between Patreon and YouTube membership. Join one. If you join both, that's phenomenal. We appreciate your support. But you just need to join one, whether that be the YouTube membership or on patreon.com, because we supply the same benefits. Either one. Same benefits, folks. Go to patreon.com/MarkRogersTV or join us right here on YouTube with the membership here, and you will get our picks. You get my picks. You get the picks from 12 media members. There we go. 27-14 against the spread. I'm still mighty upset about the Texas Tech Oregon game in which Texas Tech had an interception called back in the end zone up by a score late in the game, and then they blew it and did not cover the spread. I would love to say I'm 28-13 against the spread, but actually, in fact, I missed that one. So I'm 27-14 against the spread. And we will try to keep that up. That's a difficult line to keep up. I'm not an odds maker, not a bookie, not a handicapper. I just keep track of these teams. And I predict about 60% against the spread. If you know anything about putting a wager or two on the line, you know that that's good enough to make money. Or you can just check out my picks if you want to support what we do here at the Voice of College Football. Join us on Patreon, and you also get the Discord link. Again, that can either be on Patreon or the YouTube membership. You get the same thing. You get the Discord link where you can talk college football 24/7, 365. You get my picks. You get the picks from the media guests that we have here. Mike, that's going to be tough to keep up. I got to say, that's going to be tough to keep up. But I'm usually around 58, 59% for the season. And I also make it difficult on myself because I pick all the top 25 games. And then I also tack on a bunch of other games. So the more games you pick, a lot of those guys that are on various websites and sell their picks for $1,000 a season or whatever, they'll pick like 3 games a week, which their little systems, their little models will determine, okay, these are the surest 3 games. What I did for a couple seasons, and this proved to be pretty effective, was I did have a few confidence picks. Maybe I'll start doing that again. So I'd have like my 20 picks for the week, but then I'd also say, these are my 3 confidence picks. And those, I was in the 70 some percentile on those. I'll have to remember to do that again. Mike, thank you for that. Appreciate your support. Gregory, do you think this list could go viral? I would like just about anything on this channel to go viral. That would be just fine. All right. I did want to run down. Let's go through week 3. Miami has scored on Bethune-Cookman. Shocker. And also keep in mind that we've got our Miami post game, and that's coming up following the game on the Miami channel, Miami post game. All right, here we go. Virginia, Maryland. Talia's thrown 2 picks and 4 touchdowns. Caden Prather, the incoming West Virginia transfer wide receiver, has 2 touchdowns already for the Terps. They were down 14-9 in the third quarter to Charlotte. They came back and got their second win of the season. Virginia with the new starting quarterback, the Monmouth transfer, Anthony, can't remember his last name. So Virginia, a 2 touchdown plus underdog against Maryland. There you see the Air Force and Army both in play. Those are 2 really good matchups there. I expect, especially the second game there on CBS Sportsnet, 8 p.m. Eastern time with Air Force trying to go to 3-0. Utah State lost to Iowa a couple of weeks ago, but only by 10. Florida State, Boston College, FSU came off a demolition of Southern Miss. And no, that doesn't mean a whole lot, except that's what championship teams do. And we've not seen Florida State run through an opponent like that in years. 53-point win against Southern Miss. And Southern Miss is not a bad team coming off 7-6 in a bowl win. Boston College, Castellanos, their starting quarterback in place of Emmett Moorhead, and Jeff Hafley fighting for his job. 3-9 last year, already have lost to Northern Illinois and barely beat Holy Cross 31-28 last week. Penn State, Illinois, biggest game in the Big Ten this week. Conference game with Penn State opening in Champaign. Illinois looked awful on defense against Kansas last week, gave up over 500 yards of total offense to Jalen Daniels and company. Much different animal in Penn State, but Penn State athletic defense, just phenomenal team. I really like Penn State. I almost picked them to win the Big Ten. Did not quite pull the trigger, but would not be surprised. This is, I don't want to call it a trap game for Penn State, but there could be a bit of a look ahead to Iowa, possibly. Luke Altmaier and the Illinois offense need to get it going. They only had 7 points deep into the game against Kansas. And again, Illinois needs to bounce back in a big way. LSU and Mississippi State. The Bulldogs led this game in Death Valley in the fourth quarter last year before LSU and Jaden Daniels pulled it out. They go to Starkville this week. They're a roughly 9 or 10-point favorite. And LSU, of course, this is their first significant game since getting blown out with 31 consecutive points against Florida State. Mississippi State survived Arizona at home, double overtime. They stopped, I put it in quotes, stopped Jaden DeLora on like a 4th and 18 play in which he basically outran the entire Mississippi State defense, zigzagged all over the place, almost got the first down, but MSU survived Arizona in overtime. I like this matchup. I like this game. I will be all over those two games at noon Eastern. Kansas State, of course, with Deuce Vaughn last year, defeated Missouri at home 40-12. This time they go to Columbia. Mizzou barely got by Middle Tennessee 23-19 last week. Kansas State defeated Troy, handing Troy its first loss in 13 games. Liberty, Buffalo, others, Louisville, Indiana. We talked about that with our guy Jeffrey, first caller of the night. If you want to check out our conversation with Jeffrey on Indiana and Louisville. And that's really the end of the noon matchups of consequence. Although Iowa State at Ohio, look out, Cyclones could be closer than the experts think. At 2:30, Notre Dame looks to extend to 4-0, taking on Central Michigan as they warm up for Ohio State. South Carolina, Georgia, that's a 4-touchdown spread as Georgia finally meets somebody with a pulse. But South Carolina, wow, they looked awful against North Carolina 2 weeks ago, giving up 9 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, and a 100-yard rushing effort. Spencer Rattler is off to a really good start. Alabama, interesting location to this game, playing in Tampa against South Florida. The last time Alabama played a group of 5 on the road. Give it to me. Anybody? I don't know is the answer. Well, for one thing, Alabama's not played a game before the Texas game last year, had not played in 11 years on the road out of conference. But that's just a rare game. You got to think that has everything to do with recruiting and nothing else. That is the only reason Alabama's going to go to South Florida and play and beat them by 52 and come home. San Diego State coming off a 25-point loss at UCLA is going to Oregon State. Oregon State has looked phenomenal its first 2 games. Awful opponents, but still looked phenomenal in disposing of San Jose State and Cal Davis. Oklahoma goes to Tulsa. Tulsa was dragged by Washington last week by 33, and Oklahoma had a bit of a tussle against SMU last week. Andrell Anthony had a big game for the Sooners, and so did their starting running back, who's a bit of a surprise with Marcus Major and Javante Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk, the names that we were expecting at running back. It was Tyree Walker, who ran for over 100 yards for OU and has emerged. But Oklahoma only led SMU 14-11 in the fourth quarter. Minnesota, North Carolina. We talked about that on our Big Ten Paradigm podcast, so check it out. And we will drop the link all over social media. But Minnesota ran it 56 times and only threw it 15 last week. Drake May, North Carolina, back-to-back 100 rushing efforts from British Brooks and O'Marion Hampton. Northwestern Duke, they've played now 7 times since 2015. Northwestern actually looked pretty good as a very slim underdog against UTEP last week, won by 31. Duke, the talk of college football, one of the talks of college football, and they're 2-0, looking to go to 3-0 as an 18-point favorite. When is the last time Duke was an 18-point favorite against a Power 5? Iowa's at home against Western Michigan. Look out for Cade McNamara. Still nursing a quad issue. Iowa has not thrown it much, but I would expect they should start to work on the passing game a bit. Virginia Tech Rutgers, another one of those 6 ACC Big Ten matchups. Oh, got a call coming in. John, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I am doing well. What's the good
Well,
word?
I just wanted to talk with you about something. I'm not really trying to say anything groundbreaking here. I think a lot of people would easily agree with this, or they've already come to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Jimbo Fisher is gone at the end of the season.
Mm.
Do you agree or disagree with that?
I think he should be if this continues. If he goes 7-5 or worse, and even 8-4, 8-4 is not acceptable there based on what they're paying him and the resources they're putting into that. But that might keep his job. But I think of it this way, John. I think that if Wisconsin was able to put together a $20 million package for Paul Chryst, and I think it was negotiated down a little bit, but still, and Florida State's coughed up in excess of $30 million for the likes of Willie Taggart, then the Texas money, I know that it's like 75 mil, but it's going to drop another 8 or 9 after this year, or maybe even more, that it gets into the 60 or 65 mil range, and maybe they negotiate it down. Yeah. If 50 million for Texas A&M has to be the equivalent of 20 at other places. So yeah, I don't think that's going to deter them from going to an 8th season with Jimbo Fisher.
Well, here's my reasoning for why I really think he's gone. Would you agree that last year A&M beat Miami because they won the line of scrimmage battle?
Yes.
And this year it was just the complete and total opposite.
True.
A&M got dominant, especially starting about halfway through the third quarter. They just started getting slapped around, and I mean, the team has regressed in my opinion, and I think it's just that obvious to anyone. And I think that if Jimbo Fisher would take a 35 to 40 million dollar lump sum payment right now,
Yeah.
he'd already be gone. I think the buyout is in the works as we speak.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. I think that's a good call. That
And
when I looked at Texas A&M last year, despite their awful record, they were such a better team than Miami last year. I know that they only won the game by a score and it was close, but they played a better schedule. They played more competitively. Then, after watching the two teams play on Saturday, it was not an extremely competitive game.
no, it wasn't. It wasn't. And something else I wanted to talk about. Well, okay, let me there's somebody in the chat asked who is going to pay off Jimbo's contract, and my answer would be you are. Every time you fill up your car, that Texas oil money is gonna pay off Jimbo's contract.
Yeah, that's tracing it back to the source. Yeah.
But also something else. I mean, this isn't really that big either, but it's just I don't see anyone talking about it. No one has noticed that Penn State basically has 3 weeks to prepare for Ohio State this week. This year. I mean, Penn State has an open date, then they play UMass, and UMass is about as cupcake as cupcake gets.
Yeah.
You know, and then they play Ohio State, and Ohio State has to play Purdue, and you probably don't have to devote your entire week to preparing for Purdue, but you probably have to devote at least some time to playing Purdue. I mean, I was like, what's your because I'm thinking Penn State beats Ohio State this year. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of made what people would consider a homer pick, but I'm not going to consider that because I don't make homer picks. I don't know when the last time I picked Ohio State to win the national championship, but I think that Michigan is by far the most solid team in the Big Ten.
Oh, yeah.
meaning the least questions, the highest floor, all of that. But the more and more I looked at Penn State just prior to making the prediction, I was thinking, Mark, are you crazy? You should pick Penn State. I think their defense is loaded. I think it's athletic. They got NFL players all over the place.
They've got that
And
guy at I think it's left tackle. That guy's going to be a first round pick. He is a monster. I
Yeah.
forget his name.
Fashanu, something like
Yeah,
that.
it's Samoan, I think. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah,
though.
I butchered it. I left out like a syllable somewhere, but it's something close to that.
Closer than I got. Yeah, that guy is. I think he's the best player on their team. He is just a beast.
Yeah, who is that? Shoot. Yes. Oh, I nailed it. Olu Fashanu. Yes.
Okay, you were close, if nothing less.
I thought I said Fashanu, didn't I?
Fashanu, is that what you said?
I
Okay.
said Fashanu. I couldn't think of his first name, and I thought I left out. I thought it was even more complicated of a last name. But yeah, he's a phenomenal player. And I just think really the only weakness, and I don't consider this a weakness, the only place where they don't have a chance at being elite is their wide receivers they're good. They're fine. They're not like breathtaking, freakish, just crazy top end USC, Ohio State, Florida State wide receivers, but you've got a good tight end with Theo Johnson, and I believe in the quarterback, and the two running backs, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, are top flight, and they should take a leap from their true freshman seasons. Yeah, I'm maybe kicking myself for not picking Penn State.
It's not too late to change your mind.
Oh no.
That game.
Once
that
it's
game isn't.
sealed, it's gone. Can't do that. I don't do that.
You know, I think you're allowed to change your mind. And it sounds like you want to, but you don't want to pick against Ohio State either.
No, it has nothing to do with not. Well, I don't want to pick against Ohio State because I would like my team to win, but that's not the reason I don't. Again, I haven't picked Ohio State to win a national championship in at least 6 years, so it's not like I picked them to win every year or anything close to it.
So the last time you picked Ohio State to win a national championship was 2017 or 2018?
Well, I'm saying that I don't even know if I picked them then. I went back and looked at all my picks, and I could only find like the last 6 years, and I never picked them to win the national championship. I picked them in the playoffs, I think, almost every year, maybe every year, but not to win.
They were really good in 2019. I was shocked they lost to Clemson because they had a better team than Clemson that year.
Yeah, well, they controlled most of that game.
Yeah, sure. Oh, but getting back to the Texas A&M firing Jimbo thing, who do you think they go after? Because I think they're going to go after Elko or Dion.
Oh man, that's the you did a nice job with those. Have not considered. Man, those are two good ones, and of course Elko was there, and he's just tearing it up.
They beat Clemson. That was just really impressive what they did to Clemson in the second half.
Sure was. Wow. I haven't given it any thought, but those are two great names. Who else? Anybody else in the chat with a name for the Texas A&M job? Man, they think a lot of themselves, and they've got a ton of money, so they should be able to go after whomever they want.
The thing with I think Elko, he strikes me as a really good guy, and he doesn't want to move on after just 2 years. He kind of wants to have a sense of finalcy, he'd like to stick around for at least one more year. But I mean, if A&M starts offering like $12, $13 million a year, oh, that's going to be so hard for him to turn down, and I don't think Duke can match that kind of money.
You know, who is on the ascent in the Power Five? Everyone I can think of is, you know, there's just a few coaches that probably wouldn't, but that's very few. And you know, I don't see, you know, Lincoln Riley's not going to leave USC, and I don't think he's a great fit there.
I think Lincoln Riley could do very well if he just got himself a different defensive coordinator.
Yeah, that seems to be the thought.
Did you ever listen to Chuck Oliver by any chance?
No, I don't know who that is.
He has a show. It focuses mostly on Southeastern football, but he, ventures outside of it. But anyway, he has this guy on named Dave Bartu, who is a statistician.
Yeah, I've heard that
who
name.
does who does football analysis and helps schools and NFL teams hire coaches and make free agency moves, and it's based strictly on statistics. And he said that if USC won a national championship this year. Oh, and by the way, he grades every head coach and coordinator and assistant in Power 5 and G5. And he says that if USC won a national championship this year, it would be with what he has as the lowest rated defensive coordinator to ever win a national championship. So, I mean, that right there kind of tells you about how much that guy is holding that team back. I think no matter what the talent level is, it's always going to underperform because of him.
Yeah, I would say that he did improve the Oklahoma defense when he showed up.
Well, I mean, but still, see, here's the thing. At his introductory press conference, when he was hired by Oklahoma, he talked about getting lighter in the middle of the field, lighter and faster. And my first thought is, when your main problem is getting pushed around by the SEC in the postseason, getting lighter in the middle of the field is not going to solve that problem. It's just impossible because the SEC can just match anyone's speed too well. Thoughts?
Well, I don't think getting lighter, when you say in the middle of the field, you're talking linebacker, you're talking safety?
Middle linebacker and defensive tackle is what he was. I mean, if you really watch that guy's defense with a critical eye, he does not have in any one technique play calls. He does not have anybody holding down one gap or two gap. It's constantly everyone is trying to shoot a gap. Everyone in the front seven is trying to shoot a gap.
Well, if he has an influence, okay, so you're talking about Grinch's defense. You're not just talking about. Yeah, I think that it's going to be very curious about USC playing in the Big Ten and whether there's going to be a higher rate of difficulty for the Big Ten to adjust to USC or for USC to adjust to the Big Ten.
I think it's going to be the latter.
In terms of USC having more difficulty.
Yeah, adjusting to the Big Ten. And if they keep Elko at the end of the season, I think it's just going to be monumental failure of leadership in
you mean
USC
Grinch.
athletic. Yeah, that's who I meant. Who did I say?
Yeah, Elko. So according to the USC guys that I listen to, which are our guys that track this stuff every day and are looking at so forth, and they believe that USC's gotten much stouter on defense, and I mean just physically. I don't mean that they're better. We'll find out, but that they're
I mean,
just
I
a
think there's
bigger team.
I think there's no doubt that they're better. They got talent. You know, you could
Yeah.
hell
I'm
you
talking
could
about
have
physically. They've revamped their strength and conditioning to develop those kind of defensive lines that you would see in the SEC or the Big Ten.
I mean, you could have me on the sidelines doing tequila shots and calling your plays. And if you gave me 4 stars at every position or at 9 out of 11 positions, hell, I'm not going to do that bad.
I hear you. I hear you, John.
But
Anything else?
well, just one more thing. That rough little 5-game stretch USC has.
Yeah.
What do you think? How are they going to come out of it? I got them coming out 3-2 with losses to Utah and who was the other one I had? Washington.
Yeah. I had in my preseason picks that they would go to Notre Dame and lose, and that they would lose another game.
I think they're going to beat Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I don't think Notre Dame is dynamic enough to hang with the points that USC is going to put on the board.
But Utah is.
Utah just seems to have USC's number. They're good at punt. They know how to punch USC in the mouth, and USC just kind of sits there and takes it, from what I can see.
Well, I think you're basing that on obviously 2 wins last year, one of which Utah won 43-42. There were there were some very questionable calls on the last drive of that game. And then the other one, USC was up by 2 touchdowns. Caleb Williams got hurt. And, I don't want to take a win away from Utah, but that's kind of questionable in regards to whether they would have played that kind of game with a healthy Caleb Williams. So, yeah, I don't think that Utah really fits that bill that you're describing, but they're awfully sound and technically, fundamentally, and every otherwise. I never look past a Kyle Whittingham team. But yeah, I think 3-2 is the safest probability, maybe 4-1. I want to see this team play a defense. I think it'll be monumental to see that offense that could be the best offense in college football play a defense that will stick with their assignments and is athletically good enough to hang with them to a certain extent. But man, that offense is so good. As long as their offensive line holds up, and because I think their second group isn't nearly as good, I'm not concerned with really anyone outside of Caleb Williams, because not that they can withstand and don't want their best guys to be in there, but they could lose a wide receiver and still be. They have so many of them.
They could lose 2 wide receivers and be okay. Yeah, they're loaded at wide receiver.
All right, John.
All right, yeah. Good talk, Mark.
Here. Yeah, have a good night.
You too.
All right, let's roll on with the reasonable Gump.
Mark, man, how you been? I haven't talked to you in forever.
I know it. Whose fault is that?
That's probably mine.
Okay.
Though in my defense, I've kind of had my head buried in the sand for the past summer, so you have to cut me a little slack.
Well, that's all right. You got other things going on. I can understand that. What's going on?
Hey, I wanted to jump in on you guys talking about Texas A&M for a little bit. Got to put my little thoughts in.
Sure.
And they are little for as how much they matter, but of course, no one likes watching Jimbo Fisher light himself on fire more than me and probably every other Alabama fan. But he's not getting fired. Come on.
He's not going to get fired?
Absolutely not. Look, Texas A&M fans like to think that they have this hundreds of millions of dollars buried in the desert somewhere, I mean, and maybe they do, but there's one thing I've noticed, a trait that all really rich people have in common is the more money they seem to get, the less money they actually like spending. Have you noticed that? Rich people don't actually like spending money.
I do understand that, but I also understand that they signed Jimbo Fisher for maybe more money than they needed to, number one. And number two, they extended him when they didn't necessarily need to, when he hadn't proven anything.
All those are true, and they are certainly wishing that they hadn't done that. I'm not arguing that. I mean, his results are absolutely pathetic for someone who makes as much as he does. But they're just going to have to reap the consequences of that decision. I mean, he's going to win, I don't know, probably 8, 9 games this year. I don't think it's going to be another 5 and 7 season like last year. That was once in a lifetime kind of levels of hilarious watching that happen. But I don't think that's going to happen this year. But another thing he's going to have on his resume this year that they won't fire him. He's going to have a win against Alabama. Period. 100%. Like I have never bet on a college football game in my life. I've never bet on really anything other than like 3 trips to the casino in my life. But I've never bet on a sporting event ever. And I'm almost dead certain that Alabama is going to be favored by at least 9 points or something, probably even double digits. But by the time that game comes, just by virtue of being Alabama and just by virtue of Texas A&M being a cartoon, that might be the biggest just jackpot, like dollar signs in my eyes that I've ever seen.
So are we talking about covering the spread? You're talking about winning a game.
I'm talking about both. If you're telling me, not only do I think Texas A&M is going to win, but I get to get points just in case there's a fluky, weird trouble with the snap at the end of the play that Alabama pulls it out, but I still get points to cover my bet. Yeah, 100%.
So this means in a sense that you are less impressed with Alabama's performance against Texas than you were Texas A&M's performance against Miami?
Probably around the same, but there's one key factor that you got to think about here. Jalen Milroe can't even throw the ball in his own home stadium where people are behind him. He can't figure out which team to throw to. College Station might be the second toughest place to play in college football, right behind Auburn. He goes into that stadium with those fans doing all their weird 20 or 30 different traditions, and doesn't Texas A&M actually hold the loudest crowd record actually, or
Yes,
something like that?
I believe.
Yes, it is. He's going to go in there and fumble it probably 3 or 4 times, just like he did last year. Couple interceptions. It may not be a blowout. But yeah, I don't see any way Alabama goes into College Station and wins this year. Just none at all.
You don't see any way that they go in there and win.
None. And if they do, I will call back that week, and you can bring these words right back to me.
Well, I projected that if I'm really thinking about my picks, which was 10-2 for each one of them, that Bama would go to Texas A&M and lose. But when you say that they've got no chance to go there and win, and my opinion of this Texas A&M team, I got to say, dropped considerably more than my opinion of Alabama.
Look. We are finally seeing what I've been trying to tell people, including Alabama fans. This isn't Alabama fans versus the world. This is a couple reasonable, hence Alabama fans versus the world, which is that these last 2 years, Alabama was a bad team being carried by the best quarterback in college football. Go look at the last 2 years and think about what happens without Bryce Young. Okay, they're a 7-5 team, or an 8-4, or something like that. Think about all those ridiculous games that were so close that they still somehow managed to win. Texas, by the way, being one of those. Florida under Dan Mullen. Are you kidding me? Okay, games like that, both of those LSU games. In fact, we did lose one of those. Okay, the list just goes on. The Texas A&M game last year, of course, that was without Bryce Young, but that's what the team looked like. I don't see any difference between that team that just by the hair of their chinny chin chin pulled out a win against a terrible Texas A&M team last year. They look exactly the same against Texas this past Saturday. It's the same exact team. In fact, you know what? I'll amend that. There's one thing that's different, and that is when I watched the replays of the games where Jalen Milroe is throwing the ball to nobody, or he's getting sacked, or running it out of bounds and losing yards. When the camera panned out, I don't know if you noticed this, because I'm assuming that you watched the game because it was the biggest game that weekend.
Yes.
I don't know if you noticed this, but when the camera panned out, I was usually finding at least one or two of our receivers who were wide open, like 20 yards, sometimes touchdown, could walk into the end zone open. So it looks like the wide receivers may have actually gotten good. Trouble is, they don't have anyone to throw it to them.
Yeah, we had a Texas guy on here a few minutes ago who said the same thing about the Alabama wide receivers being improved from the last couple of years. So you think that Saban would just stand by and watch this happen? That he doesn't have other options? He's just going to let Jalen Milroe just tank the season?
I happen to think that there's a reason Jalen Milroe didn't get yanked, or the fact that he's starting at all. And that usually means that he probably doesn't have anyone better back there. Now, sometimes that's wrong. You know, when Lincoln Riley was playing Spencer Rattler over Caleb Williams, who's clearly better. So, you know, sometimes it's something like that. Les Miles had a couple quarterback controversies himself. Or that whole Ohio State in 2014 where Urban Meyer was keeping his best quarterback on the third bench somehow. But generally, the rule is you're seeing the quarterback that you're seeing because there's not a better option. And as far as do I think Saban's going to sit back and let this happen? Well, he's been sitting back and letting it happen for the last 3 years, 2 years and 2 games. You understand? I know I sound really erratic, and that's partly by design because I'm trying to be. But this isn't an overreaction to 2 weeks of football. This is a reaction to 2 years plus 2 weeks of football. The only thing good on our team for those last 2 years was Bryce Young, and he somehow was good enough to carry the team to a national championship one year and to the Sugar Bowl the next year. Well, he's gone.
Well,
yeah,
I just have to say that I get your point, and I know that this is not an Alabama team of vintage, stock, but they were still a top 4 team last year. I understand they had arguably the best quarterback in college football, and now they've got the 40th best quarterback in college football. That means a lot. So yeah, we'll see it play out, but I find it hard to believe that they're going to be struggling to that degree. And I know that I would take the Alabama team that I saw Saturday night over the Texas A&M team that I saw Saturday afternoon.
Well, you know what, Mark? You could be right. There is a lot more football to play and a lot more teams for Jalen Milroe to throw to.
Yeah, it was ugly. There's no doubt.
Although I will say, I'm almost certain Alabama's going to go lose to Texas A&M. However, I'm also going to say that I'm actually pretty confident that they could, in fact, somehow win the West because LSU is not impressing me. Auburn's in recovery mode, although we have to go there, so that one could be. I don't actually remember if we go to Ole Miss or not. I have to look, but those are usually the 4 big teams from the West that Alabama plays. So it is quite possible because not just the West, but the entire SEC conference seems to be just like in the weeds this year. It's actually very possible they could actually win their division. But yeah, this is not. I actually was trying to tell people and Whenever I would briefly stick my head out of the stand for some air over the summer, I would try and tell people, you know what? The one thing that should be correctable about Jalen Milroe should be his throwing, right? He is a quarterback. He was recruited as a quarterback. He played as a quarterback in high school. He should know how to throw, how to take better care of the ball. He's a great athlete. He can run around. He's big. He should be able to withstand some hits. And I was thinking, maybe that's why Saban hired that Tommy Reese guy, that from Notre Dame. That they basically gave him away. I didn't see a single Notre Dame fan who was sorry to lose him. I was like, maybe that's why he hired him, because he could help him with throwing. And then the first possession against Texas, what does he do? He throws it right to the Texas corner or safety or whatever it was. So
yeah,
I
think it's actually to the point with Jalen Milroe, if I'm reading this correctly, especially when you see these shots from behind center and see what he's seeing downfield, that some quarterbacks make bad decisions, but they see what they're doing. They see where the defense is. They just make a bad decision. They just underestimate the coverage, underestimate the speed, the angle. They underestimate or overestimate their arm. They make just a bad judgment. With Jalen Milroe, I just think in both cases, he just didn't even see it.
Right. Oh, no, he couldn't have. Well, like me and whoever that other Texas guy you were referring to both said, Alabama's receivers were getting open. And in fact, the times he did see that they were open, he usually overthrew them. I remember there was one that he could have just walked into the end zone, running down the sideline. It was on a 3rd and 10, and Jalen Milroe just threw the ball, 10 yards ahead of him. And it was an easy throw, too. He wasn't even being pressured, which was
Well, then
actually a miracle, because
he's not going to watch that for too long. I don't know that he's going to watch that for too long. I got to think that Ty Simpson or, Tyler Buckner, I've seen enough of him that unless, quarterbacks do improve, players do improve, they can improve. And that's what I was expecting out of Jalen Milroe. I thought, on one hand, I was concerned for Alabama. I was concerned that they brought in a transfer. I thought, okay, why do they need to do that? And it's Tyler Buckner, who should not be a starting quarterback for a top team in America. And then I thought, okay, Milroe's still not winning this job. So I'm concerned, especially when I heard guys like Greg McElroy predicted that Ty Simpson would be the selection, that he is the best passing quarterback on campus. So I would expect Nick Saban to make a change if that's what's needed.
Well, and the thing of it is so Saban's always had this kind of philosophy. He'll tolerate some bad or mediocre quarterback play as long as they take care of the ball.
Yes.
Okay. He'll tolerate you not seeing, not doing your reads right. He'll tolerate you, having to, walk out of bounds or getting sacked when you're not supposed to every now and then, as long as you're not turning it over. And Jalen Milroe can't even claim that. So to me, it's a little bit telling that he still didn't yank him throughout that entire game. Even when because Alabama we didn't have any success moving the ball, with him until like the end of the 3rd quarter or something, when we actually scored our first touchdown. So there was, and of course after that, then it would have been foolish to pull him. Let's just keep playing him and see how this works. But up until then, there was a lot of evidence you had that this ain't working. Something's not working. Now, by the way, I don't want to sound like I'm just the president of the Jalen Milroe hate train. The offensive line is at least as much to blame, if not more. I don't know how those guys who outweigh a lot of NFL lines, how they're getting bullied around the way they do. Texas is getting pressure with three and dropping 8. I don't even. That is just startling to me that the O-line continues to be that bad. So it's not all his fault, but still, a lot of it is.
Well, the only thing I can point to that makes sense to me as being something that could be the source of all these issues, or not all of them, but the coaching staff not being as quality of a staff than what Saban has had in the past.
Yeah, well, that was certainly. I mean, hell, it's almost not even worth. It's not even worth just guessing about it. I mean, that's almost a fact. that is. I still don't. I think everyone's sort of scratching their heads, much the way, fittingly, Tommy Reese was doing during the game. I don't know if you remember that, where they showed it. They showed him on camera, and he's like running his hands through his hair.
Yep.
And I'm like, you know what? There is no more body language that is more telling than that right there. He has no idea what to do. I mean, you know how I know that? Because that's exactly what I do in stressful situations where I don't know what to do. I sit there and I run my hand through my hair like that.
Yeah. Well, these coaches have a few different, layers to their jobs, and they bring in these players and they've got to build them up. They've got to teach them how to play their position better than they did in high school. And they've got to teach them proper technique. They got to teach them, and then they've got to work with them kind of mentally to have a right approach and have a tough-minded approach and be tough, be poised, and all that. Then they build a scheme. They build a scheme on offense. They build a scheme in defense. Then that scheme has to be adaptable. It has to be, so they have to be able to self-scout, and they have to be able to scout the opponent to build a game plan that's effective. And then once that game plan gets punched in the mouth, they got to be able to adapt. So there's a lot of different layers to all this, and maybe they've hit upon a collection of coaches that aren't particularly good at a percentage of those. That's much less than the ones in the past, because they can't be missing on. You're going to miss on 4 and 5 stars, but with the mass volume of these players, you can't be missing on that many, and have your recruiting ranking being what it is. So
right. Well, that's why I keep telling people, I'm like, look, Alabama doesn't have the worst players on offensive line. We don't have the worst receivers in the country. Okay, it's not the damn players. So because it's like you said, there's no way that we're missing on every single one of these. Okay, something's not clicking, or hasn't been clicking the last 3 years in the coaching, and that's 100% squarely on the shoulders of the head coach. That's Nick Saban's fault. I mean, I have to be blunt about this. There's no more sugarcoating it. We all like to blame Pete Golding, and he was terrible for the defensive woes for pretty much every season he was there, other than 2020. And then we all like to blame Bill O'Brien because he didn't know what to do with Bryce Young, and he liked to make him wait until like the last second before he snapped the ball before making a million checks at the line. But
all right, man. Well,
eventually, with all these people moving on and you're getting fired or whatever, and we're seeing the same shit, eventually we gotta just come to Jesus and realize, you know what? Maybe Nick Saban is just not all that he used to be. And I hate saying that, but
could be.
It could be. He's all
yeah.
Hell, I don't even know. Is he like 72 or something? I mean,
yeah,
he's getting up. He's getting up to be like Joe Paterno.
That time comes for everybody in every industry at some point, whether they're 52 or 72 or 92. And maybe that's it for him. Maybe he's still really good at what he does, but he's not the best at what he does. Maybe he's the 20th best at what he does, which is still good enough to hold down basically any job in the country, but he's not the mastermind that he once was. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you calling.
All right.
Yep.
Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Reasonable Gump. All right. These next 2 calls are going to be rapid fire. I mean, like, spit it out, get your point. It's going to be like 30 seconds.
Damn, like
Michigan
that?
Guy, what's going on?
Hey, man, you saw as a Michigan guy, you like, man, I got to get through it quick.
Exactly. I was just scared of the Michigan guy. Can never hold up to those debates.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Hey, man, what you think about the, Nebraska player, showing who the new Super Bowl in the Big Ten is, man? What you think about that?
Did I think about the Nebraska player who did what?
Did you hear the Nebraska player who said we gotta play every game like we play in Michigan? Michigan's the new Super Bowl, the Big Ten.
Okay, great. I don't usually consider Nebraska to be the greatest source of determining who the top teams in the Big Ten are.
No doubt, no doubt. But my main thing I wanted to say was, man, look, I like Dion, but I was on this call-in show the other day, man. It's called
Yeah.
Player's Choice.
Yeah.
And the hyperbole, the crazy talk about Dion, I don't wish nothing against Dion, but I hope they lose one of these games by 100, man. They talking about this guy like he gonna turn Colorado into a dynasty, man. These Dion fans are getting on my nerves.
Well, I hear you, but until proven otherwise, they can certainly talk all they want, because as of right now, he's pulled off 2 wins. Now, are they playing the toughest teams in the world? No, but he's got 2 better wins than most teams in the country. So I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, and I'm not debating you or disagreeing with you in any way. He's done a great job. He's done let me even back up. He's done a really good job for what we have to judge him on right this second, which is coaching these 2 games at this level. He did a great job at Jackson State. I don't know how much of that is him versus his ability to hire well around him, but that's part of it. That's a huge part of it, is being able to evaluate coaching talent and get guys that are going to make it happen for you on the staff too.
That's true. And then one thing before I go, man, I just little exercise here, man, because I've been trying to debate this.
Yep.
What do you think's a better defense, 2016 Bama or 2021 Georgia?
Ooh.
Those are my 2 favorite defenses.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I'd have to say, because of Bama's secondary, the 2016 Bama defense.
Okay, good. But then follow up. What do you think? What do you prefer, the 2019 LSU offense or the 2020 Alabama offense?
Wow. Well, everyone that debates that, I'm sure, is going to strictly look at skill positions and the quarterbacks. Of course, Mac Jones is not the NFL quarterback that Joe Burrow is, but LSU did not have, Edwards, Clyde Hilaire, really good running back, but Najee Harris better. I'm gonna just have to go with Burrow. I'm gonna have to go with LSU.
Okay, perfect. Now take that 2016 Bama defense, take that 2019 LSU defense. You got 23 Michigan. Hope you have a good day, man.
All right. So the Michigan fans are feeling it this year. So we are watching right now Joe Burrow and the 2019 LSU offense reincarnated in Ann Arbor, and we're seeing the 2016 Alabama defense likewise on the other side of the ball. This team, forget these games against UNLV and East Carolina. They should win the Ohio State game like 56-7. And maybe that's where we're trending. Certainly in this century, Michigan is owed about 13 or 14 wins. So what are we looking at this century? 17-4. So Michigan fans, you should be happy. I don't know what it's like. I know what it's like to lose to Michigan, definitely. And I know what it's like to go through a dry spell when you have championship aspirations, meaning Ohio State late 80s, early 90s. So I know what that's like, but I don't know what it's like for 20 years or close to 20 years. So between 2000, even the 2004 Michigan team that won the Big Ten, boy, they got sent to the Rose Bowl with a butt whipping by Troy Smith and company. So it's really been since like 2003 that you would look at Michigan and say, there's the best team in the Big Ten. Even though Ohio State, fared better in a bowl game and finished ranked just as high and all that business, but they lost to Michigan. So, man, you got to go 2003. And really, for it to be a consistent. When's the last time Michigan was consistently better than Ohio State the way Ohio State's been better than Michigan? You'd have to go back to the early 90s. You would have to go back because then Michigan beat Ohio State 93, 95, 96, but they weren't better. They had a lousy season and pulled off an upset. So you'd have to go back. Mike Ford says the 80s, and that would only be part of the 80s. That'd be the back half of the 80s for sure. Michigan was better. And the early 90s, Michigan was better. They were much better, 90, 91, 92. And then 93 was kind of blurred because Michigan really took it to them. And Ohio State did not win in 96. They won in 98. Michigan was much better in the late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And that would be the last sustained Michigan is better than Ohio State. So I would be ecstatic too. Because it's been a long, long time. And it looks like Michigan's a better team. I don't know that they've been the better team the last couple of years, but they certainly were on the day of the game. Which, by the way, again, I was thinking while I was watching this and commenting on YouTube that there's no way people should be calling me a homer. I came across a video that was suggested to me by YouTube of the 1993 Ohio State team that tied for the Big Ten championship. This lazy and agenda-driven production showed the Ohio State team and all their great plays and throughout the 1993 season. And completely because against Indiana, Ohio State clinched a share of the Big Ten championship against Indiana the week before Michigan. They just skipped right over the Michigan game, went right to the bowl game against BYU and the win there. And I thought, okay, this is a farce. This is a crappy production. This is slanted. It's not even slanted. It's completely biased. You're skipping the biggest rivalry in college football and the biggest game of the year. They didn't skip any of the other games. So that was pretty pathetic. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here. The Voice of College Football. We will be back Friday night after Maryland and Virginia. We'll take that game in. If it's a blowout in the second half, we'll get on here early, but we'll be on late Friday night, somewhere in the 10 to 11 o'clock range, and we will talk college football with all of you. Bring some friends with you. We had a light little crowd here tonight. We need to do better than that. So bring some friends with you on a Friday night, and we'll see you. And who knows, if anything happens like it did a few days ago with Mel Tucker, I'll be on Friday afternoon at some point as well. We will see you soon. Yes, Michael, I agree. You did get robbed of the 1993 national championship. I've stated that consistently. I even think I produced a video that, yes, Notre Dame should be the national champion of 1993. Book it. That's why we have rewritten the record books, and we have gone through all of that. And yes, Landfound, bring some folks with you over to the Miami postgame after their scrimmage against Bethune-Cookman. We'll see you all on Friday night.